FPS Win. Written by
嘟嘟雪球
Chapter 195. Of course, Yaozi would not agree to Chen Chen's a bit excessive request right away. Her reply was extremely official, which was not in line with business practices. But in fact, as long as there is a routine, it is enough for Chen Chen. Anyway, it's impossible to get the wool dropped in one step. You have to fight and negotiate at the same time. Once you can show the value, you will get the wool happily. Now it seems that he is just taking advantage of Ming Xuechang's death to eliminate a smuggling route that brings instability. But what if, as Chen Chen said, he can completely reshuffle Kokong and then use some means to cut off the connection between Kachin and Banglong? In that case, one of the tentacles of a certain country that uses Kachin to stir up trouble in a certain region would be cut off. Although the problem cannot be completely solved if those harmful elements are restricted to Kachin and in the direction of the plateau, the difficulty of a certain task would be reduced. Therefore, Chen Chen was not in a hurry about this. Weak courage is just an appetizer. One day, these problems will be completely solved. Looking at the present, the problem that he needs to solve immediately is the two businesses in Banglong. Beat them all first and hurt by Suaching. This is not just to destroy the smuggling routes. More importantly, the simultaneous destruction of the two trading companies will definitely bring more uncertainty to Bai Suaching's transactions with Kachin. In other words, the situation in Kokong will be further disrupted. Peng Diren will seize this opportunity, and I will also seize this opportunity. As one grows stronger, the other shrinks, and the strength of the coup army represented by Bai Suaching will continue to decline, and the chances of killing him will continue to increase. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's like in a group fight. When you are at a disadvantage, it is impossible for you to go straight to the enemy leader. But what if you quietly pull in the bystanders and beat them up while fighting the peripheral brothers, and then sneak into the crowd? Believe me, as long as you are not stupid enough to shout, "I hit you," the situation will definitely turn into a chaos. After hanging up the phone, Chen Chen already had a clear plan in his mind, so he fell asleep without any worries. The next morning, the four of them went out to find a place to have breakfast, and then began to disperse according to the plan to conduct preliminary peripheral intelligence reconnaissance. They did not hide their identities as mercenaries, but used the kidnapping case of Huamei Commercial Bank as an excuse to look for useful information everywhere. Chen Chen and Li Bang were walking together. They first took a stroll around the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company. However, when Chen Chen saw the so-called courtyard-style trading company mentioned by Xiao Yu, his brows couldn't help but frown. Fuck, this is called a yard? It's just a bunker. Chen Chen's words were not an exaggeration at all. The entire Lao Fa Jia Trading Company actually occupied a nearly square area of about 70 by 70 meters. Four rectangular buildings formed the shape of a courtyard. The walls were obviously reinforced. The iron nets on the windows used to block projectiles were enough to prove how strict the defense was. There is also a wall at least 3 meters high outside the four buildings. There is an electric fence on the wall. Judging from the thickness, the wall uses a double-layer design. It is built not only with bricks, but also with reinforced concrete structure. It's not that this thing can't be blown up with C4, but the explosive equivalent required is quite astonishing. Moreover, even if it was blown up, it would not cause much damage to the wall. If there was only a small gap, the real firepower point behind the wall could immediately suppress and blockade fire from inside the building. There's no way to suppress this place with projectiles. Li Bang said thoughtfully. Yes, let alone projectiles, it would be difficult even if we used fuel-air explosive bombs. The wire mesh on the window is too dense and looks quite strong. The fuel-air explosive bomb can't penetrate it at all. Even if it explodes, the damage caused near the narrow entrance will be limited. Even if we use a lot of smoke bombs, we still have to break in. The entrance is too small. No wonder this job fell into our hands. It turns out that we are the famous V. What does V mean? Li Bang asked curiously. That a big bastard who thinks he is the savior. Chen Chen sighed and said helplessly, "Go ahead and take a look." Li Bang nodded and walked in front of Chen Chen to keep watch. The two of them walked around the side of Lao Fa Jia Trading Company and came to the main entrance of the company. They didn't come closer, but just sat on the rocks by the roadside and drank water, pretending to rest. This action was quite common, not to mention Banglong. Even if you were sitting in front of Bai Suaching's house and drinking water, no one should come to bother you. At most, they would look at you a few more times, right? But the guards of Lao Fa Jia Trading Company were too vigilant. Before they had sat down for long, the sentries at the door came to drive them away. Of course, the other person's tone was very polite, and he said, "It's not safe with all the traffic here, so please don't stay here." After all, it is a business, and even if it is receiving special customers, it still has to open its doors for business. There are so many ruthless characters hiding in this tiny place like Banglong. They won't cause trouble for themselves. But it was these words "looks very friendly" that made Chen Chen frown. The guarding here can really be described in one word: strict. It can even be said that it is more strictly guarded than the military camps of some ethnic armed groups. If you want to attack head-on, even with the advantage of equipment, the difficulty is extremely high. After walking out of the guard site, Chen Chen subconsciously looked back, only to find that not only the guards at the door, but also the sentry on a high post on the top of the internal building was looking in their direction. The other side actually has a central command mechanism. The information detected by the main gate was transmitted to the high sentry points so quickly, which shows that the opponent's SOP is really at a very high level. What a strong enemy. Is this the Laufa Commercial Bank? Is this the Banglong Pavlov Red Building? They are all ordinary buildings, no different from the residential courtyards commonly seen in mining areas, but they give Chen Chen a sense of impeccability. Let's go. There's nothing to see here. Chen Chen silently left the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company. The two of them pretended to be doing nothing and wandered around the surrounding shops. When they came out again, the surveillance from the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company had finally left. At this time, Li Bang also started to think, is there any way for us to get inside and take a look? At least we need to see their actual defense situation so that we can formulate an offensive strategy. That's impossible. According to Xiao Yu, Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank is a membership-based one. They only accept new guests who are familiar to them or recommended by familiar guests. We can't find a guarantor, and there's no way we can cause any trouble. Let's go back first and see what's going on over there with Shi Dakai. If the defense of Bunning's village is so tight, I feel like we can actually give up on this mission. So difficult? Li Bang asked in surprise. In his mind, Chen Chen was fighting a battle that seemed impossible to accomplish to ordinary people. If even he said he wanted to give up, then maybe no one else could do it. It's not difficult. The main reason is that Lao Feijia's geographical location is rather special. There are no commanding heights to use. And with so many bunkers, the damage done by explosives is also limited. Without heavy, penetrating firepower, it is difficult to achieve results with fire coverage. We are pursuing annihilation and killing, not harassment. This is the most critical difficulty. Communicating in low voices all the way, the two soon returned to the hotel. After studying the simple map drawn by Chen Chen for more than an hour, Shi Dakai and Yang Shu, who had gone to Bangning's for reconnaissance, also returned to the room. Fortunately, they brought good news. Although Banning village is large in area, its defense is much laxer than that of Lao Feijia. Most of the buildings are ordinary brick and wood structures, with concentrated personnel and no civilians around. It is completely possible to use firepower to cover and annihilate them. But so in general, Lao Feijia Commercial Bank is the main difficulty we face. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, we can launch attacks on 2 targets simultaneously. Only 2 teams are needed on the Bangning's side, with 2 F-150S and a 107 rocket launcher. We can achieve results through intensive firepower coverage and suppression. After the battle is over, the Bangning's team can quickly enter the city to provide support. But for Lao Fa Commercial Bank, it is very likely that they will have to enter the rhythm of CQB raids. Therefore, we need to find an opportunity to complete a close reconnaissance of the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company, find out the distribution of personnel and firepower inside the trading company, and provide a basis for the raid. Well, what do you think? After hearing Chen Chen's words, the other 3 all fell into deep thought. Needless to say, Yang Shu did not have much experience in participating in such high-difficulty combat missions. In many previous battles, all he did was obey orders. So when faced with the questions raised by Chen Chen, he actually appeared to be completely confused. He looked at Li Bang on the side, then looked at Shi Dakai across from him, thinking to himself, they probably couldn't come up with any suggestions. After all, it seemed impossible to attack such a heavily defended fortress without large-caliber heavy artillery. But, to his surprise, after only a few seconds of silence, Li Bang raised his hand and spoke first. Can you continue to use poison smoke attacks? Yang Shu's eyes lit up. He had also heard of the Dongfeng Corps' battle example in Wanqi village. Now it seemed that this plan could be reused, but before he could get excited, Chen Chen rejected Li Bang's proposal without hesitation. Impossible. The poisonous smoke only works when the enemy is unprepared. The security of Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank is very alert. They will react and take the initiative to attack without waiting for the poisonous smoke to take effect. Hearing this, Li Bang nodded thoughtfully and continued. What about incendiary bombs? We have fuel-air explosive bombs and incendiary bombs. Can a blanket strike work? That's not feasible either. As I said before, the number of incendiary bombs is too small and their instantaneous lethality is too weak. The enemy is fully capable of controlling the fire. You have to know that Lao Fa Jia Trading Company is originally a small arsenal. Their fire protection measures cannot be bad. Then let's go back and buy some more? Chen Chen couldn't help but roll his eyes. Do you think you can buy it whenever you want? It will cost us our lives to collect all these things. If I can buy everything, and the company still has $8 million in its account, wouldn't it be better for me to buy a nuclear bazooka? All right, Li Bang smiled awkwardly, while Shi Dakai on the side asked. Then is there any way to detonate their ammunition depot and cause a secondary explosion? The arsenal is underground. If you want to do this, you can only use bunker buster bombs. Where can we find bunker buster bombs? 2. Seeing Shi Dakai fall silent, Yang Shu scratched his head and said nothing. In fact, he thought these plans were all very brilliant. But after such a discussion, it seems that there are indeed many shortcomings. It seems that tactics are not as simple as I thought. Everyone was thinking hard. In this atmosphere, Yang Shu, who was not used to active thinking, tried for the first time to look at the problem from a global perspective. He stared at the simple map that Chen Chen placed on the table, and the layout of the entire Lao Fa Jia Trading Company gradually emerged in his mind. As he thought more deeply, he seemed to have entered a state of being there. He was very curious about this situation, but what he didn't know was that this was just the basic requirement of reading the map to fight. After a long while, he suddenly said, so our problem is that the enemy's buildings are too solid and small-yield explosive weapons cannot effectively kill them. At the same time, if we conduct a surprise attack, the entry route is too narrow and the enemy is too numerous, which makes our combat difficulty increase dramatically, right? Yes, this is a very typical light infantry attack scene, just like the battle for Pavlov's Red Building. Chen Chen looked at Yang Shu with a hint of relief. Although this was a condition that everyone else knew, the fact that Yang Shu could comprehend it so quickly was a big improvement. Seeing Yang Shu's eager-to-learn look, he continued, what's even more difficult is that we don't have that much time. If we can't take it down in a short period of time after a quick raid, we will have to withdraw. Because the police battalion in Banglong is not completely useless. They will definitely report to the higher authorities and mobilize troops. If we are surrounded, we will die. Clear. Yang Shu nodded gently. After receiving Chen Chen's affirmation, his confidence increased greatly. He only paused for a moment before continuing. So, in fact, if we want to win this annihilation war, there are mainly two directions. Or, we increase the intensity of our firepower, penetrate the enemy's defenses directly, and use heavy firepower to annihilate them. Or, we can expand the entry route, use our advantages in vision, tactics, and personal ability, and use the team's flexibility to complete the harvest. Is this also correct? Yes. Chen Chen nodded again, and then explained, in fact, what we are discussing now is mainly the solution to these two problems. It would be great if we could transfer our AH-2 here for use. Wait, are there any heavy artillery that we can use over at Bunnings? No. Kai shook his head and replied, we have observed that the weapons on sale here are mainly light weapons. If classified by firepower level, they are not as good as the weapons we currently have. Chen Chen sighed in disappointment, but at this moment, Yang Shu spoke again. I have an idea, but I don't know if it's right. Melee combat is the last option, because no matter what, the danger is too high. We still have to prioritize long-range elimination. And we definitely don't have any heavy artillery, and it's impossible for us to get it in a short time. But think about it, the reason we want heavy artillery is to penetrate the enemy's defense and make it collapse, right? So, in this case, our best method is to use fire. Yang Shu looked serious, while Chen Chen shook his head helplessly. Theoretically, it's correct, but the problem is that this is not the Henry Hotel. There are too few flammable materials, and we don't have the conditions to enter and set fire to it. Even with the pyrogel incendiary bombs we have, the flames can only cover an area of about 50 square meters. But the area of Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank alone is about 5,000 square meters, plus there are multiple floors. If you want to completely cover it, it would conservatively take 200 to 300 incendiary bombs. We can't find that many incendiary bombs, even if we turn the whole northern Myanmar upside down. If we really want to fight, we will probably need 9M22s. No! Yang Shu interrupted Chen Chen and said, you can use gasoline. Incendiary bombs are hard to make, but is gasoline also hard to make? But how do you get the gasoline in? Get a tanker truck? I guess we'll be stopped the moment we enter Banglong, before we even get to the edge. Chen Chen looked at Yang Shu with a frown. He felt that this boy's ideas were good, but he always had the thoughtless habit of a line army. He himself had thought about replicating the Mekong River explosion, but the problem was that as the situation changed, the conditions for implementing tactics also changed. The people at Lao Fa Jia Trading Company are not fools. How could they allow a highly dangerous tanker truck to approach? Today they just went there for a walk, and they were already warned. He wanted to teach Yang Shu a lesson, but then, what Yang Shu said made him dumbfounded. Yang Shu said, I was thinking a fire truck can spray water, so can it spray fire? Yang Shu's idea was very simple. He had read the news and knew that the principle of a fire truck was to use a high-pressure water pump to pump water out of the water tank, and then spray it dozens of meters away. Then, according to his simple thinking, it is obvious that since it can spray water, it can also spray liquid. Since it can spray liquids, it wouldn't be too much for me to fill the water tank with gasoline and then spray it out of the nozzle, right? Hearing his train of thought, Chen Chen was simply stunned. He had never thought that the so-called fuel delivery problem could be solved in this way. What is this low-profile version of Sun Peck? Good man, if you can really do this, you will be the next guerrilla god. You will be the savior of the Middle East, and you will be the good father of the Black Brothers. But obviously, things are definitely not that simple. The water pump used in the fire truck is not explosion-proof, and rubber seals are used between components. This thing is waterproof, but not oil-proof. Once it is penetrated by highly flammable gasoline, static sparks generated by internal friction will flash, and the fire truck will no longer be a fire truck, but a large self-destruct truck. As for how long the sealing ring can last, no one can say for sure. Therefore, it is absolutely impossible to simply and crudely convert a fire truck into a fire truck. If Yang Shu's idea is to be realized, at least the high-power water pump in the fire truck must be replaced with an explosion-proof oil pump. The flow rate of large oil pumps of different powers can reach 500 to 3,000 liters per minute, which is actually the same as the water pumping capacity of a medium-sized fire truck. If it can be modified, spraying gasoline will be really simple. But here comes the problem. Where to find an oil pump? Who will modify this thing? The first problem is easy to solve. Not to mention other places, there are large oil depots near Xingwei. It is not easy to buy oil. I can just buy oil depot equipment and oil pumps, but the latter is much more difficult. Although pumps are very common in daily life. In fact, even a certain big country in the north has been playing with them for decades and has not yet fully understood them. Because this is a job that is highly dependent on accumulated experience and experimental data, and the manufacture of a pump is also linked to many factors including materials, hot and cold processes, process control, etc. Even after 10 years, the international high-end pumps are still monopolized by a few old countries and manufacturers. It is really difficult to find someone in northern Myanmar who can handle this kind of thing. But just because it can't be found in northern Myanmar doesn't mean it can't be found anywhere. This is such a good idea. Why not give it a try? Thinking of this, Chen Chen patted Yang Shu's shoulder approvingly and said, "Good boy, you have a bright future. Keep working hard. You're one step closer to number 7. Looking at Chen Chen's reaction, Kai felt the danger for the first time. He looked at Chen Chen and said, "Captain, you're not serious? Can this thing really work? Using a fire truck to spray gasoline? Why do I feel it's so unreliable? Let alone anything else, if they discover us and blow us up with a rocket launcher, we don't have to fight them. We can just ask Minglang Zen Temple to pray for our souls. Chen Chen smiled slightly and replied, so this is the crux of the problem. It's not easy for any other car to get close to Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank, but if there are frequent fires inside, it's normal for fire trucks to drive over and be on standby, right? Of course, the details of the plan still need to be discussed. It's impossible to just criticize it without thinking. But don't you think this idea is much more reliable than just going ahead and fighting? What Chen Chen said was actually true. In the defense of Pavlov building, the Soviet side had only 23 people, relying on a 4-story red brick building, and defended for 58 days under the attack of German light infantry that was dozens of times larger. Moreover, the German army at that time was not like the current Dongfeng Corps, which only had some small weapons for light infantry. They not only used 88 guns and 105 guns many times, but also used 150 assault guns in the later period. During the last week, the German army dropped countless aerial bombs before they finally took down the building. Does the Dongfeng Corps have such firepower? Does the Dongfeng Corps have so much time to waste? Obviously not. Since that's not possible, we have to try some unconventional means. No matter how outrageous the idea of having a fire truck spray gasoline sounds, it is a good idea when there is absolutely no other way. Chen Chen explained his views, and after careful consideration, Shi Dakai finally nodded. And at this moment, Li Bang, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke again. He said, if only we had a helicopter, a firefighting helicopter. It's the kind of firefighting helicopter that has a bucket underneath. We pour the oil into it, then fly into the sky and pour it down. Good idea. Chen Chen gave a thumbs up but then said, we'll talk about this later, but the most urgent thing is that we have to get enough gasoline and a fire truck that can spray gasoline. It's about the gasoline, Dakai. Go contact Peng Shuqing and ask him to find a way to get it for us. The 7th Brigade has its own oil depot, so it won't be a problem to transfer some gasoline. As for the fire truck, I'll figure it out. An hour later, Chen Chen called Xiaoyu. After the call was connected, he said, Comrade Xiaoyu, we are ready to launch an attack on the 2 trading companies. But now, we have a serious problem. The defense of Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank is too tight. It's like a high-end version of Pavlov's building. With the few people we have, it's impossible to get in. Have you understood the situation before? Have you not done any tactical simulation? Chen Chen's words were meant to confirm Xiaoyu's attitude. If she had known that this thing was impossible to defeat and would send her team to die, then there would be no need to cooperate with her in the future. However, Xiaoyu's answer was in the process of cleaning up. We have considered infiltration operations, quick CQB raids, and cutting off the power supply to attack the building at night using night vision goggles and other equipment. Isn't that possible? No. The opponent's defense is even more strict than we expected. We can't get in at all. How strict is it? The building has been reinforced with double walls and electric fences on the outside, and a central command system inside. All security personnel are quite professional and seem to have received training. The Shadow Corps did it. I understand. Xiaoyu on the other end of the phone side, and then said, then give up. There's no way to fight, even if you have heavy artillery. This is beyond your capabilities. Don't be stubborn. Clear. Chen Chen answered immediately, but soon changed the subject and said, however, I have another idea. Can you send us a helicopter in advance? We don't need a military helicopter. An ordinary civilian transport helicopter will do. It's impossible. It can't be done in the short term. Xiaoyu refused without hesitation, which was within Chen Chen's expectations. He pretended to sigh, then continued. That's all we can do. But if a helicopter doesn't work, a fire truck should be fine, right? Fire truck? Xiaoyu was stunned. What do you need a fire truck for? Isn't there a fire truck in Myanmar? There are some in Myanmar, but the fire trucks in Myanmar are all water pumps. I want to change that thing into an oil pump that sprays oil. As soon as the words came out, the other end of the phone fell into dead silence. After a long while, Xiaoyu gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence. Sunk. You are a lunatic. In fact, in a city with complete industrial facilities, this level of modification is easy to accomplish. 10 hours after the phone call, the car was delivered to Myanmar. This time, even the formalities were saved. Not to mention Poly, Dongfeng, Sinatruck, Isuzu, Grumman, and Golden Shield. These companies sell countless fire trucks every year. After all, fire trucks are not sensitive equipment, and they are no different from tractors, at least not now. As for whether they will become a controlled export item like gas tanks in the future, that is not certain. In short, after the car arrived in Myanmar, Chen Chen immediately began to arrange for personnel to deliver the car. He originally planned to arrange for the Dongfeng Corps' remaining personnel to deliver the gasoline sponsored by the 7th Brigade, but after thinking about it carefully, the headquarters security would be too weak, and Mu Gui's outsourced mercenaries might not be enough. In addition, tanker trucks and fire trucks are not sensitive items, and there is no risk no matter where they pass through. So he simply asked Peng Shuqing to arrange it together. Peng Shuqing naturally agreed without hesitation. Ever since he saw the warrior coming from Mengla, his judgment of Chen Chen had been completely formed. Now, even if Chen Chen gave him an order saying, you Mugue should do legitimate business in the future, he would report to the top leaders in a serious manner and regard this as an opportunity given by Big Brother. Giving away 2 cars is naturally a piece of cake. So, 20 hours after Chen Chen made the call, he saw the car he wanted at a camp near Huko. In appearance, it is no different from ordinary fire trucks, except that the oil pump has been modified, the water tank has been treated with anti-static and explosion-proof methods, and several brackets for fixing water cannons have been welded to the outside. There is no doubt that Xiaoyu, who was in tune with him, fully understood his plan and even optimized it. Unfortunately, there was not enough time. Otherwise, Chen Chen even doubted whether Xiaoyu would convert this fire truck into a remote-controlled one for him. When it comes to IED, they're the masters. There weren't many surprises this time. What really surprised Chen Chen was the people escorting the car. The one who came was not Mu Gui's mercenary, but the Jackal from Chase. Seeing Jackal's happy smile, Chen Chen asked, "Why are you here? Did your Chasely headquarters let you run around?" The Jackal's expression was serious. He shook his head and replied, "Wrong. What is Chai Zili? I am the Jackal of the Shura Corps. It's our first meeting. Please take care of me. Whatever you say is what it is. What are you doing here?" Chen Chen rolled his eyes at him, but the latter didn't care at all. "I came to see. You guys are addicted to setting fires, so why can't I watch? I think that in northern Myanmar, the fire attack tactic has its inherent and irreplaceable advantages. But you are the only one who can use this tactic to its full potential. So, I have to come and see what it is this time. A civilian version of a jet train? I've never heard of a civilian version of a spray train." Chen Chen sighed helplessly and explained, "In fact, it is essentially a method of firepower infiltration, which is only suitable for specific scenarios and specific combat modes. In fact, if we can use enough long-range throwing launchers to provide saturation coverage, we will definitely not choose this option. But this solution also has an advantage, which is the penetration. By using the fluidity of the liquid, we can extend the killing range to corners that ordinary weapons cannot reach." "Understood." The Jackal nodded slightly and began to observe the structure of the car. Without bulletproof armor, the blast resistance is very poor. So how exactly do you plan to drive the vehicle over unnoticed and complete the initial fuel drop? This is indeed a core issue. In fact, this fire truck is a small fire truck equipped with a 5-ton water tank, which is one of the smallest fire trucks in the fire truck family. However, even if it is only 5 tons, it is not easy to empty the water tank in a short time. According to the test Chen Chen had seen before, when 3 guns spray water simultaneously and the pressure is pulled to the maximum, it takes 4.5 minutes to spray 5 tons of water. If the car is really parked there and sprayed stupidly, let alone 4.5 minutes, the car will be blown to pieces in half a minute at most. The reason is simple. No one can fail to smell the difference between gasoline and water. Thinking of this, Chen Chen replied, "There are 2 main options now. The first plan is to use the frequent fires to trick the enemies in Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank into thinking they are the wolf, and then find a way to drive the car into their yard. But with this plan, the evacuation of our own personnel will be a problem, and it could easily turn into a suicide attack. Another option is to create smoke in close proximity, hide the car in the smoke, and then use the smoke as cover to spray gasoline fuel. Similarly, the disadvantage of this plan is also obvious. How long we can last depends entirely on luck. If we are unlucky, the opponent can send us flying with just 1 RPG. So, it's still quite troublesome at the moment. How about it? Do you have any good ideas? Am I not here to visit and learn?" The Jackal scratched his head and said, "Aren't you from the Shura Corps? The Shura Corps still doesn't want to go to the battlefield." "That's not the case." After a brief pause, the Jackal's expression became serious. "With 4.5 minutes, no matter what method we use, it's impossible for the other party to not notice it. I think the most likely scenario is that 1 or 2 minutes after we started spraying fuel, the other side started to notice something was wrong. In this case, covering most of the buildings is considered to have achieved the goal. The remaining unused fuel must be consumed in a centralized release manner. Well, it's impossible to go directly into the enemy's interior. We need at least 4 operators alone, 3 water guns, and a driver, right?" "That's right." Chen Chen nodded in response. "Then why not combine them and create a time difference? We spray first, and then, when the other side starts to be alert, we attack from the other side to buy time. The fire trucks maneuver around and continue spraying in other directions." "What is the other party's command system like?" "There is a central command system, and it is quite efficient. With high efficiency, the command hierarchy is definitely not clear, and it is impossible to take care of both in northern Myanmar. That means that once an emergency occurs, the other side is likely to fall into a situation of excessive command, which is our opportunity. How about it? Do you want to try it?" "There still seems to be too much uncertainty, and personnel safety is still an issue." Chen Chen frowned, and after a little thought, he said, "How about this? Let's combine several plans. The first step is to create a fire at or near the Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank, and mobilize the city's fire brigade to put out the fire. Do this several times, so that the Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank will become desensitized to fire trucks. The second step is to drive our fire truck over and take a warning stance, but don't take action yet. Step 3, snipers clear the observation posts, and fire trucks start dropping fuel. Today's wind direction is northwest, so we need to drop fuel in at least the west and north directions, which will take about 1.5 minutes. Step 4. The attack team will launch attacks from the east and south to attract enemy firepower. At the same time, the fire truck will drive to the main entrance of the Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank, set up water guns, and enter the no-man spraying phase. All personnel will evacuate. In the 5th step, once the fuel delivery is basically completed, we will start the ignition." After listening to Chen Chen's plan, Jackal nodded in agreement, but then asked, "Is it possible for the gasoline to be ignited by the electric spark in advance?" "That's beyond our control, so let's not consider it. If that happens, everyone should retreat immediately and re-strategize." "Clear." All members of the Dongfeng Corps answered together, and the attack strategy on Banglong Lafaji Trading Company took effect immediately. The team was ready and set off. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. The convoy took a small road from Hoko to Banlong, and it took only a dozen minutes to reach the outskirts of Banlong. Afterwards, Groups 5 and 6, which were responsible for the Banningswang operation, led by Bai Go and Yang Shu, continued to detour along the northeastern path and went to the north side of Bangning's wing to lie in wait. The remaining team members followed the path on the east side of Banglong, close to the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company, and hid behind a woods 400 meters away from the trading company. At the same time, a desensitization campaign was quickly launched against the old and wealthy commercial banks. Lin He and Li Bang traveled lightly to the target location and selected an unused old factory building near the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company to set up incendiary bombs, which triggered the first wave of small-scale fires. After receiving the alarm, the Banglong Fire Department immediately responded. The only fire truck took a full 20 minutes to reach the fire site, and then symbolically sprayed some water to put out the fire, which was almost extinguished. Naturally, Lin He and Li Bang were watching from a distance. After the fire brigade left, they immediately changed their location and set fire to the second target point. This time, they did not use incendiary bombs, but only lit a bonfire. But because the bonfire was mixed with a small amount of construction fuel, there was a lot of smoke, and it looked quite serious. The fire truck went and came back. After seeing the fire clearly, the firefighter in protective clothing kicked the still burning fire away with a curse, and then left angrily. For the last time, the two men did not choose a location near the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company, but went around to the west of the city and lit a small pile of straw. This was Chen Chen's plan, to desensitize the Lafaji Commercial Bank while not letting them become overly nervous. And apparently, the plan went very smoothly, because when the Dongfeng fire truck filled with fuel drove to the street near the Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank and stopped, the radio communications intercepted by Bao Qi did not contain anything unusual. After all, those security guards are not professionals. Even after training by the Shadow Corps, they have only learned some superficial things. The real core is not so easy to change. And this is actually the real opportunity for the Dongfeng Corps. The time was ripe, and Chen Chen gave the order to prepare for the attack. A total of 6 members from Group 2 and Group 3 of the Dongfeng Corps approached the fire truck and joined the driver of the fire truck. The group led by Chen Chen and the group led by Jackal, Chasely, approached the south and east sides of the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company on foot, preparing for a feint attack. The remaining members of the 4th group started the combat vehicles, ready to rush to the battlefield as soon as the fighting started. At this time, everyone in the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company was still unaware of the impending disaster. In a room on the 5th floor of building number 1 on the west side, a man in a neat suit sat behind a desk, frowning as he looked at the report on the table. He even combed his hair meticulously, which seemed particularly out of place in northern Myanmar. After reading a report, he looked up at the assistant opposite him, and then said, "The situation in Laojia has become more and more chaotic. After President Ming died, Dad's actions have become more and more radical. It was about suppressing bandits and seizing power, and it even got involved in the big event of Su Min Wu and Yochin. I always feel that this is not a good sign, but I can't tell why. Ong Tingling shouldn't have died, at least not so quickly." Hearing his words, the assistant, or adjutant, nodded slightly and replied, "It has indeed changed too quickly, but this change was not something General Bai actively requested. It was because the Wei family died too suddenly and too resolutely, which made General Bai feel the crisis. So he had to strengthen his cooperation with Lao Myanmar to gain more power and ensure his own safety. By the way, boss, do you think the Wei family incident this time has anything to do with the North?" After the words fell, the man in the suit fell silent. After a pause of a few seconds, he answered, "It doesn't look like that because the people who did this were too unruly. They set fire to the old street and burned down the entire building. No matter how tough the North is, they can't do such a thing. I heard that this was done by a mercenary group in Shan State. They seem to be obsessed with arson. They did it several times when they tried to rob Nakam. This time is not that special. The only thing I can't figure out is why they got involved in this matter. Maybe Peng Diren gave them enough money." "Makes sense," the adjutant sighed and said, "but it has nothing to do with us. They can't possibly hit us anyway. Even if we want to fight, our place is not so easy to attack." "That's right." The man in the suit nodded slightly complacently and continued, "So don't think too much about it. Just focus on the things in front of you. We must quickly stabilize our business. We have received news from Kachin. We need to ship a batch of equipment there and then head north along the Yunnan-Tibet line. There are more than 20 guns and 2,000 rounds of ammunition in total. It's not a big deal, but it's still quite difficult. How about it, Old Wu? Do you have any good plan?" "That depends on how much money they are paid. If they don't pay enough, no one will be willing to do this kind of head-breaking work. They promised us 1 million, and if we can deliver it, they will give us another million, but there is a time limit of 1 month. So urgent?" the adjutant asked in surprise. "Yes, they seem to be planning to do something big." The man in the suit stood up, his expression changing unpredictably. "To be honest, this kind of thing is much more dangerous than smuggling or drug trafficking. However, wealth and honor come with risk. In order to gain leverage, sometimes you have to take risks. We are businessmen anyway. What do they use these guns for? What does it have to do with us?" "Yes," the adjutant replied in deep agreement, and then continued, "It feels like there's a fire everywhere, just like tonight. This world is really a mess. Ha ha ha, fires are everywhere. Don't tell me, it's true." The man in the suit smiled and shook his head, then suddenly pointed out the window and said, "But it's okay. At least there won't be another fire in Banglong tonight. Look, isn't it raining?" Using a fire truck to pour fuel on the Lao Fa Jia business is really a risky approach because the window of control is too short. If someone discovers it, a bullet is unlikely to blow up the fuel tank and cause an explosion. But what about an RPG? An armor-piercing incendiary bullet? If it touches anything, it will explode, and if it is shot, it will kill you. The driver and operator will not have any time to react. In addition, if the spilled gasoline is ignited in advance by electrical sparks in the building or other fire sources, the consequences of the explosion can be catastrophic. Although the concept of a train spraying fire sounds cool, if it really sprays fire, I guess the operators won't even know how they died. Therefore, Chen Chen's strategy from the very beginning was not to spit fire, but to spray fuel. He had to seize the narrow window of time for the other party's central command system to respond, use the fire truck to spray as much gasoline as possible, and then block the car in front of the Ga Yaozi trading company before the situation became uncontrollable, and quickly abandon the car and escape. In this case, interrupting the other party's decision-making and reducing their reaction speed become the top priority. After the arson team, led by Yang Shu, began to act, a total of 3 teams on Chen Chen's side also immediately began to intervene. A total of 4 sniper rifles locked onto 4 enemy sentries. About 20 seconds after the gasoline was spilled, at the moment when the enemy had just completed their first intelligence feedback, all the sentries on the periphery fell. Smoke came out of the muzzle of the gun, and blood gushed out of the enemy's body. Chen Chen, wearing a thermal imaging device, quickly scanned the outer perimeter of the western building. After confirming that he had not missed any targets, he immediately continued to give orders. 30 seconds. The enemy is starting to gather, and they haven't figured out its gasoline yet. We have at most 30 seconds. Fire trucks approach the wall, moving from south to north. Throwing team, prepare to use smoke bombs for cover. Number 2, use the rocket launcher to attack the south wall and cut off the power supply to the power grid. The rest of you provide covering fire, and be careful to avoid the spray path of the fire truck. The vehicle group moves forward to the northern road, and the automatic howitzers are ready to provide cover fire. Clear. There was an immediate reply over the radio, and Chen Chen set up his 416 Hong Kong dollars and used machine aiming to sweep the windows of the building on the south side, shooting down an enemy who had just set up his gun and was about to counterattack. At the same time, the M82A1 in Shurdakai's hand also fired. The enemy, who was taking over observation on the top floor of the building, had just shown his head when the large-caliber bullet penetrated the bunker and knocked him to the ground. This seemed to be a signal. With this gunshot, all light weapons immediately opened fire. Boom! The .40 firearm in Bao Chi's hand hit the south wall of Lao Fa Jia Commercial Bank. The double-layer wall could not be completely blown down, but under the huge shock wave of the explosion, the power grid on the wall had been blown off, which created a safer opportunity for the fire truck that was still pouring gasoline. Automatic firepower continuously spewed bullets towards the buildings on the south side. Rather than suppression, it was more like an attraction. Under the fierce attack, the enemy fell into a brief confusion. The command center subconsciously mobilized troops to the south and chose to postpone the situation happening on the west. It's just a delay of a few seconds or 10 seconds. But this is enough. It took him 10 seconds to get feedback on the situation, another 10 seconds for him to make a decision, and 30 seconds had passed by the time his order was transmitted back to the front line, and the frontline personnel responded. In these 30 seconds, the 3 water guns of the fire truck had sprayed more than 600 liters of gasoline to the entire west side building at the highest pressure. Adding the previous 30 seconds of failure to respond, the west side building had been splashed with 1,200 liters of gasoline. All windows were covered and all firing points were soaked, which brought great difficulties to the enemy's counterattack. Because they don't dare to shoot. Are you kidding me? Now they all knew that this was not rain or water, but gasoline, standing in a pile of gasoline and firing. Did they think their lives were not long enough? The decision just made was instantly invalidated, and all the enemies who rushed to the west building and planned to attack the fire truck were stunned. Once again, the decision was interrupted, not by killing high-value targets, but by changing the battlefield environment. In just 1 minute, the situation changed rapidly. This is the real battlefield, and this is the real decision-making process under fast-paced and high-intensity conflicts. Otherwise, how could the ODA concept be elevated to such a high position in modern military theory? Isn't it because of its importance and effectiveness? Bao Chi continued to monitor the enemy's radio communications. In the clear intercom signal, he heard the enemy commander issued a new order. Everyone head to the red building. They're going to start a fire. Take that fire truck out of the red building. The so-called red building is the building on the north side of Lao Fa Commercial Bank. The building was oriented north-south. Theoretically, it was possible to launch an attack from the roof and side windows to suppress the fire truck, but Chen Chen had 2 teams assigned to the fire truck. In addition to the driver and the hose operator, the 2 teams also had 4 light machine guns, and these 4 light machine guns suppressed the entire side of the building so that they could not even raise their heads. It doesn't need to be too long. 20 seconds is enough. Because in just 20 seconds, 400 liters of gasoline had been not evenly spread across the entire facade of the building. Once again, the enemy lost the opportunity to open fire. After receiving the feedback of dare not open fire, their commander was about to collapse, but before he could make a decision, Chen Chen took advantage of the electromagnetic control and responded again a few seconds in advance. Give up the west position. Number 1, use smoke bombs for cover, and the fire trucks will go to the north side to spray the red building. You only have 20 seconds. Listen to my countdown and start acting. Vehicle crew, bombard the north gate. Fire a round of machine gun spread at each window on the floor. Clear. After a decisive response, 1 smoke bomb after another was thrown. The road on the north side, which was nearly 70 meters long, was instantly covered by smoke. At the same time, the Meisher vehicle, which had arrived and was on standby in the wasteland further north of the road, began to suppress the gate of Lao Fa Jia Trading Company with its mounted Type 04 howitzer. The heavy machine guns on the other 2 modified armed pickup trucks also began to spew flames, and large-caliber bullets hit the wall, causing debris to fly. Grenades fell like raindrops, and the enemy who had just received the order from the command center and rushed here was in great danger. They even looked at the 3 cars opposite with some helplessness, watching them standing there fearlessly and raining deadly bullets at them. This wasteland was originally cleared to bring greater security to the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company, but now it has become the enemy's best defensive position. How is this possible? No. How can this be impossible? A skirmisher with a few broken guns might need cover from trees and houses, but an elite mercenary with a warrior and an automatic howitzer would not need it. Once again, the enemy's decision-making process was blocked. Since the start of the battle, this is the 3rd time that Chen Chen has interrupted the enemy's ODA loop. As smoke rose, fire trucks began to pour gasoline on the north facade of the building. The enemy had almost no chance to launch a counterattack because it took at least 10 seconds for them to be suppressed by heavy machine gun fire and to get out of cover again to fight back. 10 seconds later, when the heavy machine gun fire finally stopped, they looked out to find their target, only to find that most of the windows had been doused with gasoline, and the few floors that were not affected were too low, making it extremely difficult to find the target through the smoke. Don't turn off the fucking gasoline. Fight back with the rocket launcher. Fight back. On the surveillance radio, the enemy commander's voice had begun to become hysterical. He felt that he was fighting this battle as if he was suppressed under someone's shadow. Every step was guessed, and every decision was countered. The conflict in the south was still going on. He knew it was a feint, but he had no way to make an effective counterattack. The main gate had been knocked down by a round of bombing, and it was impossible for him to rush out. But the problem was that the enemy didn't seem to have thought about coming in at all. They're going to set fire. They're going to suffocate themselves in the building. We must find a solution quickly, and we must destroy the fire truck as soon as possible. Fire? Let's have a fire. At least for now, the buildings on the south and east sides have not been affected. So, he calmed down and said, "Everyone, retreat to the white building on the east side immediately. The blue building on the south side continues to hold on. Don't worry, they will." Boom! Before the commander finished his words, a huge explosion was heard. This was a salvo of 4 rockets, but 8 shells were fired. Because they were using twin-mounted 84 rocket launchers, the napalm bombs instantly caught fire, and the entire outer wall of the east side of the building was almost completely covered in flames. In fact, the lethality of such an attack is not great, as the fuel only burns on the outer wall. Not to mention the back of the building. Even if you just retreat to a corridor away from the window, there is no need to worry about damage from the flames. However, as Chen Chen had said long ago, the shock and suppression brought by the incendiary weapons were so strong that all the security personnel who were maneuvering paused. They subconsciously wanted to rush out towards the north gate, but at this moment, they saw a scene that made them extremely terrified. The flaming red fire truck had already stopped in front of the gate. The fixed water guns poured gasoline into the interior. It is impossible to get in because the gate has multiple layers of barriers that even tanks cannot pass through. However, it cannot come in, but oil can. The gasoline sprayed from 3 water guns traveled nearly 50 meters and splashed onto the open space inside the store. It was like a sudden heavy rain, and the clothes of the enemies standing in the open space in the square were all wet. To be honest, the traffic volume is not that large. But this is not water after all. Knock it off! Knock it off! Knock it off! The commander shouted frantically, and at this time, Chen Chen issued instructions to the arson team through the radio. Evacuate personnel, provide cover for the vehicle team. Incendiary armor-piercing shells ready. Ignition! There was a loud bang. As an armor-piercing incendiary bomb hit the ground in front of the fire truck, the gasoline that had begun to evaporate in less than 2 minutes instantly caught fire. The high concentration of gasoline vapor exploded, and after a slightly dim flash of fire, all the buildings splashed with gasoline caught fire. The buildings on the west side, where the most gasoline was splashed, burned the most vigorously. Although the flow on the north side was less, it was high enough to create a temperature that was completely inaccessible. Put out the fire? At this moment, fire management has become a joke. Can you use a fire extinguisher and a fire hydrant to put out a fire as big as hell? Do you really think you are from the north? There was no way out. The moment the fire started, everything was over. The wailing sounds echoed throughout the Offa commercial bank. The only place left for them to survive was in a building on the south side. The security guards who survived the first wave of explosions had no time to follow orders. They ran south like crazy, completely ignoring the commander's order to destroy the fire truck. At this time, the unattended fire truck was still spraying gasoline, to be more precise. It was spraying flames. After the explosion, the flames flowed back along the oil column. It spewed out and quickly ignited the flames at the exit, forming 3 shocking columns of fire. The gasoline on the surface caught fire, but the relatively cooler part inside continued to move along the predetermined spraying route. It seemed as if there was a rain of fire in the sky, and it was real rain of fire. Chen Chen didn't know how long this car could last. Before the flames broke out, it had already sprayed out more than 2,500 liters of gasoline, but at this time, there was still nearly half of the gasoline reserve in the fire truck's water tank. Once it explodes, it will be a grand fireworks display. Group 3 retreat, reunite with the vehicle group, and head to the south to support me. Group 4 remains on the north side for observation and alert. Jackal, stay on guard on the east side. Wait for the fire to spread. The enemy can only evacuate from the east or south. We'll sit tight and wait for them to come and defeat them. Clear. At this point, the fire had become uncontrollable. Only 3 minutes had passed since the first drop of gasoline fell on the wall. The fire truck finally collapsed as a rocket fired from the south, building blew it up completely. Boom! The flames created a small mushroom cloud, and the shock wave swept through, shattering all the glass in the surrounding buildings. But the explosion did not put out the fire. Only a gentle northwest wind blew by, and the raging flames reignited. The enemies in the south building had already felt the scorching heat because the flames were beginning to spread in their direction. In just a few hundred meters, the vehicle group and the second and third groups that set the fire rushed to the south side and completed the final reunion and defense line arrangement. At this time, the enemies in the south building began to smash the windows frantically. They didn't care about the possible enemies in front of them because they knew that if they didn't run away at this time, they would be burned to death by the northwest wind. A corner of the south building had already started a fire. The gasoline on the ground flowed into the underground arsenal. Who knows when the explosion will happen? Fast, too fast. It was so fast that they had no time to think, so fast that they had no way to cope with it. What happened in those few minutes was completely beyond their comprehension. Finally, the wire mesh on the first window was pried open, and everyone jumped out of the window to escape impatiently. They immediately saw the gap that was blasted open by Bao Qi, and they fled one after another along the half-collapsed wall. They knew that guns were pointed at them, but they no longer cared about that. Defense. Establish defense. Retreat slowly. Chen Chen saw the man who was shouting and giving orders, so he gave the order without hesitation. Kill it. Leave no one behind. The harvesting process was not smooth. After all, dozens of enemies did not rush out at once. After being suppressed by the first round of machine gun fire, they quickly retreated back into the building. There were more than 20 bodies left in the gap between the south building and the wall, but there were still more than 70 enemies. Relying on the sturdy buildings, they began to counterattack the Dongfeng Corps. The dense firepower formed by heavy machine guns and rocket launchers made the Dongfeng Corps unable to raise its head for a time. As expected of being the largest arms dealer near Kokong, the equipment level of this company is far beyond that of ordinary mercenaries. They even had more than 4 heavy machine guns. Moreover, they had 4 heavy machine guns that were hastily deployed during the evacuation. Chen Chen couldn't imagine what kind of terrifying firepower he would face if he had really chosen to attack by force. But now it's all over, because after being interrupted in making decisions again and being suppressed again and again, with the flames continuing to spread and blockades ahead, the enemy finally made a fatal mistake. Their people were too crowded, so crowded that there were several, or even more than a dozen people gathered in one room. In order to gain the firing range for heavy machine guns, they dismantled the barbed wire used to protect against rockets and projectiles. This is the most convenient killing scenario for fuel air bombs. 4 fuel air bombs penetrated into the room, where the 4 firing points were located without any hindrance. Accompanied by high temperature and air waves, the 4 heavy machine guns quickly fell silent. At this point, the enemy has actually lost all possibility of struggling. They desperately tried to return to the north gate, but the square was already completely engulfed in flames. The first round of explosions occurred. Chen Chen felt an unusual vibration in the ground beneath his feet, and then flames screamed into the air, releasing a real firework. The enemies in the south building had to retreat again. They wanted to cross the short distance of more than 10 meters to the east building, but how could the jackals guarding there give them a chance? They had no incendiary bombs, but they still had light machine guns. To block the exit, all you need is an M240. This was a real suffocation. The enemy suppressed in the south tower could only watch the flames getting closer and closer. They still had nearly 50 people left. In fact, compared to the Dongfeng Corps, they even had an advantage in numbers. However, they really couldn't fight anymore. The gunfire stopped for a full 2 minutes. During these 2 minutes, the only sounds around the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company were the roar of flames being blown by the wind and the occasional dull explosions. Then, at a certain moment, intensive gunfire suddenly rang out in the south building. No bullets were fired because the bullets were aimed at their own people. Immediately afterwards, a piece of white cloth was extended from the window at the back of the south building, and an unarmed man climbed out holding the white cloth. Ceasefire. Chen Chen gave the order calmly. Of course, he could really kill everyone here. He didn't have any rule against killing prisoners. What's more, these people have been proven to be colluding with certain violent terrorist forces, so there will be no trouble no matter how he kills them. However, if he killed them all, he would not be able to obtain more information about by watching. It's okay to stay, no big deal. After hearing his words, everyone in the Dongfeng Corps stopped. The man successfully climbed out of the window and took over a corpse in a suit and tie from behind him. He lifted the body with difficulty and then shouted, "Bai Yingning is dead. We surrender. We surrender." The entire Lao Fa Jia Trading Company was burned down, and just as Chen Chen had just received the prisoners, Bai Go also received feedback from Bang Ning's Trading Company. He fought more smoothly and almost encountered no resistance, but it was true with a round of 107mm firebombing, 219 Malawing Quach's automatic howitzers, and 8 people carrying 3 light machine guns and 2 fuel-air explosive bombs. If they still couldn't take down the lax defense of Bunning Village, Bai Go might as well commit suicide to apologize. Perhaps the only shortcoming was that their numbers were too small, making it impossible to encircle and annihilate the enemy, which ultimately allowed many people from the Bang Ning's Trading Company to escape. But fortunately, the main leaders did not escape. To be precise, it's not that he didn't run away, it's that he didn't run away at all. White Dog set the target of the first round of 107 fire bombing above his head. He was probably blown to ashes before he even woke up from his bed. Without a doubt, this was a great victory. The 2 trading companies were uprooted, and even Bai Yingning died. On the Dongfeng Corps side, only 4 people were injured. One unlucky guy was shot in the butt by a stray bullet from the north gate when he abandoned his car and fled. He was now lying on the ground to rest. Another person's clothes were set on fire by the fire meteor caused by the sacrificial explosion, and he had small but serious burns on his back. The remaining two were swept by heavy machine gun bullets in the last wave of enemy counterattack in the south building. However, they had cover in front of them and were wearing the 4th-level bulletproof vest that Chen Chen had just spent a lot of money to get from Chasely. Except for one of them having a broken rib, the other one was only slightly injured by shrapnel from a broken bullet through his arm. If he was tougher, he could even continue fighting. Joy was written all over everyone's face. This was the second large-scale battle they participated in after the Dongfeng Corps absorbed the Lion Corps. And this battle was even more exciting than the one in Xiaoshianyuan village. Fast, precise, and surprising. From the moment the attack began, the speed was pushed to the limit. They don't need to think or be afraid. All they do is follow the plans that have been determined and the instructions that have been issued long ago. Looks dangerous? Yes, of course it was very dangerous, especially for the people who were responsible for spreading the fuel. They were really afraid that a stray bullet from somewhere would kill them all. But the problem is everything happened too fast. They thought that their courage could only last 5 minutes at most before they collapsed and had to flee, but in fact, the whole process lasted only 2.5 minutes. Not to mention the fear, they didn't even have time to think, was filled. Mechanical movements cannot turn them into great soldiers, but they do turn them into war machines for a short period of time. After the initial fast-paced attack ended, and they began to regain the ability to think independently, the situation had turned into a one-sided crushing battle. Could they still fight like this? Under such a command, wouldn't it be possible to use trash as elites? This thought flashed through everyone's mind, and the mercenaries of the Dongfeng Corps looked at each other, but no one spoke. Lin He, who was participating in such a big event for the first time, excitedly ran to Chen Chen and said happily, "Brother Chen, am I okay this time? How's my car?" Nothing went wrong, and I was the last one to retreat. I wasn't afraid at all. You must remember the mistake you made this time. Chen Chen interrupted him without hesitation, and then said to Li Bang, "Li Bang, tell him what he did wrong." After hesitating for a moment, Li Bang replied, "First, when the fire truck was moving from the west to the north, you were moving too fast, causing the support team I led to almost fail to keep up, resulting in a cover gap of several seconds. Such a gap could result in death. Secondly, your route was too close to the wall. The water dragon was almost blocked by the wall several times. Third, you were too slow to evacuate after parking the car, so we had to turn back to provide cover. The brother who was shot in the butt was actually injured while trying to cover you. Fourth, I asked you to evacuate with the vehicle, but you insisted on staying. You felt that you wanted to help us in a dangerous place and leave opportunities for other brothers. This is good, very good, but on the battlefield, you must first obey orders." Hearing Li Bang's words, Lin He was stunned for a moment. A trace of guilt flashed across his eyes, but he quickly adjusted himself. Brother Chen, I understand. Sorry, I'll remember this next time." Chen Chen nodded, patted his shoulder and said, "Go and help look after the prisoners. We are short of people there." "Receive." Lin He turned and left. The jackal who was watching shook his head and said with a click of the tongue, "Actually, he has done a pretty good job. At least if my men were to do it, they wouldn't be much better than him. The mistakes he made were not fatal, and some of them were not even mistakes in my opinion. Besides, he's just a new recruit, and he's still so young. I think you should encourage him more. Don't you think he has a youthful spirit? If he keeps the spirit, he may go further." Hearing what the jackal said, Chen Chen shook his head in disdain. "You Chasely are like this. You treat fighting as a form of training because your base is in Thailand, not in northern Myanmar. If one day you can't fight anymore, you can always reveal your identities and withdraw without any loss. But we can't, brother. We have to survive by fighting. Look, we just set a big fire that killed more than a dozen people, and then beat to death another 30 or 40 people. In this case, do you think I should still spoil him?" Yes, this was his first time participating in a large-scale battle, so it was understandable that he made mistakes. But he can only do it once. Like Bao Qi, he also made a mistake once, but only that one time, because if there was a second time, he would be dead. Having said that, Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief. Then he continued, "Don't talk about youthful spirit. His whole family is dead. What youthful spirit can he talk about? Don't talk about him, this land. There's no room for that bullshit teenage spirit." After cleaning up the battlefield, Chen Chen quickly began to arrange for the evacuation of personnel. This time they captured a total of 45 people. According to the confessions of key prisoners, the standing armed force of this trading company was 115 people. In other words, they killed a total of 70 people in one fire. Compared with the big victories they had achieved in the past, this number was not that shocking. However, in the eyes of the parties involved, it was actually terrifying enough. After all, the entire attack lasted less than 5 minutes, an average of 14 per minute, one every 4 seconds. What kind of efficiency is this? Of course, most of the casualties were inflicted during the final rout of the Lao Fa Jia Company. At that time, it could no longer be considered a battle. It was just mowing the grass, so it was normal for the killing efficiency to increase significantly. If the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company had a stronger fighting spirit, the Dongfeng Corps could have even achieved a higher casualty ratio. Unfortunately, after more than half of the staff were killed or wounded, the morale of the entire Lao Fa Jia Trading Company collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. This may be their luck, but it is Chen Chen's trouble, because he didn't know what to do with these prisoners. It is not possible to take them with you. Although the forces in Banglung are complex and the Myanmar military's control is relatively weak, the police camp and the public security brigade are not pushovers. The team of less than 100 people is now afraid to rush forward blindly because the Dongfeng Corps has created such a big scene and they're not sure about the situation. But what about in another 10 or 20 minutes? If you get bitten, there will inevitably be another big fight. This is not what Chen Chen wants to see. So, after thinking for a moment, Chen Chen made a decisive decision. He asked the remaining personnel to identify the main leaders, and a total of 6 people were selected, plus a corpse. Among the 6 people, there was the man who carried out Bai Yingning's body, and the man with the walkie-talkie who was recognized as the commander without even having to be identified. As for the rest, they were all driven into the city after their guns were surrendered. It was not that they could not be killed, but mainly because they were not wearing masks and the warrior vehicles were too conspicuous. Reputation is very important. If you want to stand firm among various forces, you must at least be acceptable in form. If you wear a mask, even if what you say is nonsense, you still have room for mediation. If you don't wear a mask, once the killing of prisoners after the war is confirmed, it will become a stain that is difficult to wash away. Bai Suoqing is going to die eventually anyway, so at worst we can just settle the matter later. After everything was done, Chen Chen immediately led his men to retreat. Instead of returning to Hukou, he headed straight towards Bangning's Wang, preparing to clear out the last remaining personnel that might exist there and then receive a wave of spoils. It took the convoy less than 10 minutes to reach Bunning Village, and this farm-style outpost that seemed somewhat quiet and peaceful a few hours ago had now been completely razed to the ground. Bai Go is leading people to search and guard, but they are short of manpower and the progress is not fast. However, after the main force led by Chen Chen joined in, the cleaning work became easier. Li Bang has made extreme use of stun grenades, hand grenades, smoke bombs, and other throwing objects in small-scale building complexes. He has found the best balance between resource conservation and offensive efficiency. The 4 teams moved quickly, with gunshots and explosions ringing out continuously. In less than 10 minutes, all the buildings and underground fortifications were cleared. Chen Chen did not participate in the cleanup. After establishing a cordon, he immediately began to interrogate the captives. The 6 people knelt in a row. Chen Chen stood in front of them, holding the FN-57 in his hand, and asked them, "Is the body Bai Yingning?" "Yes, it's Bai Yingning." "Yes, he is Bai Suqing's son." "Yes, sir." A total of 5 people answered, in varying orders, but their attitudes were still positive. Bang! The FN-57 gunshot rang out, and Chen Chen shot and killed the man who hadn't spoken a word without hesitation. It was the commander. Even though his status seems to be high, it is precisely this status that makes him the best monkey to be killed to scare the monkeys. The remaining 5 people stared at the man's fallen body in amazement. They never expected that Chen Chen's actions would be so decisive and resolute, leaving no room for maneuver. Then, Chen Chen continued to ask, "Who is this person?" "The one who died." "He is a security consultant sent by the Shadow Corps. He has been here for more than 3 months. He is in charge of security and personnel training. I have nothing to do with him." The man who dragged out Bai Yingning's body answered immediately, and the others followed suit. "It's the Shadow Corps again." The presence of this mercenary group has been continuously increasing since it first appeared in Xiaoyu's mouth. Although the direction of the increase is a bit strange, it does not exceed the normal range that can be understood. Just as Chen Chen had learned before, they have always been doing this kind of work that looks high-end, but is actually very easy. Since they have a representative office in Banglong, it is not surprising that they provide security services to the largest arms dealer in Banglong. Especially when the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company has connections with Kachin and indirectly with the CIA, there is nothing strange about it. Therefore, Chen Chen did not pursue the matter too much, but instead continued to ask about matters related to Bai Suoqing. "Why is Bai Yingning here? Isn't his business in Old Street?" Boss Bai Yingning, has always been involved in the Laophagia Commercial Bank. However, before, Ming Xuechong was the main manager. He only invested as a behind-the-scenes boss and did not participate much in the management. After Ming Xuechong died, he stepped up to take charge of things. It's only been a matter of the past few days. He had indeed been in the Old Street before that. "Who are you?" "I'm Bai Yingning's adjutant, and I've followed him for a long time." The adjutant answered eagerly, as if he had no psychological burden at all about killing his superior. But it is also true that if people like them really have any idea of loyalty, then it would be ridiculous. Once their identity is determined, the main contradiction will be grasped. After that, Chen Chen's interrogation went smoothly. As the interrogation continued, and as he asked one question after another that definitely should not be asked by a mercenary, the expressions of the 5 people kneeling on the ground became more and more horrified. Coupled with the Mengshi parked on the side and watching with eager eyes, the adjutant who was the first to react even began to tremble. But the funny thing is, he was shaking not because of fear, but because of excitement. This can be seen from his increasingly excited expression, extremely positive attitude, and excited tone. In the end, he even started to spill the beans on his own initiative and dumped out information. Chen Chen originally wanted to kill 2 more people to put some pressure on him, but in the end he found that this was completely unnecessary. Bai Suoqing is now focusing his main energy on suppressing bandits, but the progress is not smooth. Peng Diren suddenly became much more capable of fighting. More than 2,000 people from the Border Defense Battalion and the Police Battalion went to attack Hongyan, but they simply couldn't surround Peng Diren's 200-plus men, and dozens of them were killed. And I heard that Peng Diren's troops have been assembled again. They're all militiamen. I don't know if they're going to attack Laojia, but it looks like it. By the way, Bai Suoqing will definitely avenge Bai Yingning, but he doesn't know that Bai Yingning is dead yet. I think we can use this as a bargaining chip. I can help you, really. I know Bai Yingning too well. Even if he never shows up from beginning to end, I can make Bai Suoqing believe that his son is still alive. This is very beneficial to you. It is an important bargaining chip. You can trade with him, trade with the Burmese army, trade with Lu Guoxi, or use it to trick Bai Suoqing out. How's it going, sir? As long as I'm alive, there's a lot I can do. Very good suggestion. In a sense, this may be the best entry point for Chen Chen to seize that narrow window of opportunity. With the help of this corpse that is in a state of both dead and alive, Chen Chen can really do a lot of things. The problem is it seems a bit too complicated. It is so complicated that once this plan is activated, he will have to have a very deep exchange of interest with the various forces here. Once this exchange of interest begins, it will be impossible to stop. I had left Hong Yin and the allied forces to avoid this kind of situation, so why did I have to step into the mud again? A mercenary group should use less political tactics. There is no need to put problems that can be solved with artillery shells on the negotiation table. Can't we just fight? The allied forces are already creating opportunities for themselves. I don't believe Bai Suoqing can hold on for much longer. Thinking of this, Chen Chen smiled and nodded and said, "Thank you for your cooperation." Then he gave the white dog a look, and the latter understood and walked forward. Gunshots rang out, and the evildoer was killed. Those ordinary soldiers might still have a way to survive temporarily, but the leadership of the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company must die, because they still have a blood debt to pay. After cleaning up the prisoners, Chen Chen threw Bai Yingning's body together with them and buried them all in a pit. This is quite ironic. They were the unattainable, powerful, and wealthy during their lifetime, but after their death, they turned into a pile of mud that was no different from them. The smell of blood and excrement was a bit pungent. Chen Chen covered his nose and walked away with a frown. At this time, Li Bang, who was responsible for searching for the spoils, had also returned and took Chen Chen to the central underground warehouse that had not been blown up to prepare to receive the spoils. The Bunningswang Trading Company has a lot of American equipment, especially abundant throwing materials. The Dongfeng Corps has replenished a large number of grenades and smoke bombs. Among them, there were 6 boxes of the most representative 2 Malawian Quaches and M67 grenades of the U.S. military, and there were dozens of M14 thermite grenades that were relatively rare outside the active troops. Even Chen Chen found 4 M15 white phosphorus grenades that had been eliminated long ago. White phosphorus grenades have been basically banned since World War II because they are too cruel. What can be found now are basically antiques that have been passed down from somewhere unknown. Judging from the situation, these grenades should not be the bulk supply materials that flowed out from Kachin, but simply the personal collection of the person in charge here. However, Chen Chen had no interest in this thing at all. So many years have passed, who knows if this thing will explode in my hands. So, he ignored the 4 white phosphorus grenades and looked directly at a mortar next to him. M120 heavy mortar. The Army's third-rate model, not the fourth-rate M327. The maximum range is 7,200 meters and the shortest shooting distance is only 450 meters. Using 120mm XM1101 high-explosive shells, the maximum killing radius is 24 meters. What does this mean? The 120mm mortar once had a classic killing case. In 1994, an artillery attack occurred in Sarajevo. Just one 120mm mortar shell killed 68 people in the market and injured 144 people. Of course, the explosion occurred in a densely populated area at that time. But even so, it was enough to illustrate the terribleness of the 120mm mortar. More importantly, this thing weighs only 600 pounds. Even the rubbish Hilux can run very fast with a gun and 4 rounds of ammunition. After upgrading to a pickup truck with a larger load capacity, its maneuverability will only be stronger. Chen Chen's eyes lit up. This thing could be said to completely make up for their lack of heavy firepower. Of course, it was definitely impossible to solve problems like Banglon Pavlov. However, if we can get some PGM-M2 bullets instead of the current ordinary M933 bullets, it will be a lot of fun. Chen Chen nodded with satisfaction and signaled to drive away a pickup truck that had not exploded, taking away the gun and all 6 shells. Li Bang immediately led his men to carry out the task, while Chen Chen walked around the warehouse to see if there was any useful equipment that was missed by Li Bang and the others. However, after looking around, there really wasn't much valuable there. After fighting for so long, they had more or less established a basic understanding of the equipment. Even if he didn't know what model it was, he could at least roughly tell whether it was useful or not. But just as he was leaving the warehouse disappointed, Li Bang ran back and carrying a black thing. His face was filled with excitement, and he said to Chen Chen, "Captain, I found something good." Chen Chen took a quick look and thought it was a good thing. MM-1 revolver grenade launcher. This thing is an antique, and its development can be traced back to the 1930s during World War II. However, thanks to its stability and power, it has not been completely replaced by the more advanced M32 since its official birth in 1970. The firepower coverage provided by the 12-round magazine is extremely terrifying, especially for a single soldier. The governor used this grenade launcher in The Terminator. The scene where he bombed the police car can be said to be a classic in film history. In the Dongfeng Corps, no one is more suitable for this equipment than Li Bang. So, Chen Chen nodded and said, "Keep it and look for any special ammunition. Find some high-explosive bombs and smoke bombs. Hurry up, we have to retreat quickly." Public Security Brigade, however, before he could finish his words, the voice of the white dog suddenly came from the headphones. "Captain, someone is coming. 2 cars, not many people." Chen Chen's expression froze, and he immediately ordered, "Prepare for battle." Chen Chen's movements were actually very fast. From launching the attack, to capturing prisoners, to the evacuation of all personnel, to the completion of the clearance of Bongning village, and now to the collection of the spoils, only 40 minutes had passed. During these 40 minutes, all the major forces in Banglong City were either watching, or were slow to organize effective actions, or were frightened by the fire and explosion at the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company and dared not attack. These situations were clearly seen by Lin, he who stayed in the city to observe, and Bao Chi's radio monitoring. Therefore, Chen Chen really couldn't imagine who would be so blind as to come over and want to have a fight with them at this time. But it didn't matter who it was. There are a large number of armed personnel throughout Banglong. But the problem is that there are very few large-scale teams. It would be easy to gather 2,000 armed men with guns here, but if you want to gather a team of more than 100 people, it can only be done by the police battalion and the public security brigade combined. Under such circumstances, the Dongfeng Corps can be said to be invincible. Whoever comes will die. There is no room for negotiation. Holding the 416 Hong Kong dollars in his hand, Chen Chen watched a J8 Jeep slowly approaching and immediately determined the identity of the visitor. Not everyone can get or afford this thing. As the military version of the Jeep Wrangler, this car was first unveiled in 2007 and began small-scale production in 2008. In the early stage, it was only delivered in small batches in Egypt. Basically, those who can get this car are Border Patrol and anti-terrorism forces of various countries, as well as a small number of Latin American anti-drug police forces. Even the Americans will have to wait until after 2020 to start using this car on a large scale. As far as Chen Chen knows, there are only a few of this type of car in the whole of northern Myanmar. No, in the whole of Southeast Asia, and all of them are in the hands of the Thai military. At that time, they were also brought from Africa relying on the so-called Joint Drug Control Program. And now, this car appeared in Banglong, and there was no doubt that it could not be from Thailand, because the Jackal was standing next to it. Then there is only one answer. That is, the Shadow Legion, which has close ties with the wealthy MPRI. Reasonable. They did kill their own people and buried their bodies. This is a bit troublesome. The J8 Jeep stopped far away. Chen Chen wanted to intercept the other party's communication, but it was obvious that the other party's equipment was different from that of other bumpkins in northern Myanmar. They also used frequency-hopping communication equipment and could not be invaded at all. The two teams confronted each other in the air. The other side didn't dare to fire the first shot, and Chen Chen didn't want to fire the first shot. The scene became awkward. After a long time, the other party seemed to have finally given up trying and finally compromised. Someone got out of the car, turned around, and placed the gun on the hood of the car with an exaggerated movement. Then he opened his hands to indicate that he was not a threat, and walked step by step towards the direction of the Dongfeng Corps. This scene always makes Chen Chen feel familiar. He glanced at the Jackal beside him, and the Jackal coughed but said nothing. But Chen Chen did not let him go. Would you like to go with me and take a look? Let's see what tricks these people from the Shadow Corps can come up with. The Jackal shook his head and answered, let's try to avoid unnecessary conflicts. The background of the Shadow Corps is still a bit complicated. Although they are not strong, they have developed rapidly in the past 2 years. They have the support of MPRI. We do not want to have too much contact with them. Don't worry, I'll help you keep an eye on the people behind you. If they dare to move, blow them up. Having said that, Chen Chen no longer made things difficult for the Jackal. He dropped the gun, but still held it in his hand. Then, he walked towards the man opposite him step by step, with an easy gait and steady movements. But he could quickly raise his gun and shoot the man in front of him at any time. This obviously did not meet the result that the other side wanted to see by actively showing weakness. But so what? The heavy machine guns of the Dongfeng Corps had already locked onto them. So, the two of them walked to the middle of the two teams. The man took the initiative to extend his hand and said, hello, I'm Red Blood Cell. You really know how to flatter yourself. Chen Chen replied in English without any hesitation. In fact, the Red Cell is a legendary special forces unit under the JTF. The name comes from the autobiography of Richard, the commander of the JTF at the time. It is known as the SEALs that surpass the SEALs, and is mainly responsible for sea-based infiltration and penetration missions. It is also responsible for a series of trap missions, complex overseas rescue missions. In terms of positioning, this thing actually combines the functions of a certain island's Tianwei force and a certain major country's general staff, general logistics department, general armament department, Coast Guard, and other departments. The work it does is miscellaneous and hated, and it was eventually announced to be downsized and disbanded before the end of the 1980s. However, even if such a legendary force is gone, there must be someone to call back its spirit. It was obvious that this was what the man in front of him did. Therefore, what Chen Chen said was not wrong at all. The latter just smiled after hearing it, but was not angry at all. The Red Blood Cell asked, what if I really am a Red Blood Cell? Maybe then we can have a real, equal dialogue. Chen Chen shook his head and replied, my friend, don't keep talking about things that have been dead for 800 years. It's unlucky. Your English is excellent, especially when it comes to swearing. Red Cell said with a frown. In fact, the words Chen Chen used were not really dirty, but when converted from the profound Chinese context, they did sound particularly vicious. But he had no intention of giving the Shadow Legion any good face, so he didn't care about the Red Blood Cell's words. He raised the muzzle of the gun slightly, and Red Blood Cell's hand immediately moved behind him subconsciously, but Chen Chen actually just moved a shoulder. This was a simple test, and the other party immediately showed his weakness. Chen Chen felt more confident, so he continued. Don't waste your time talking nonsense. What exactly do you want to do? Time is short. Let's get straight to the point. Seeing Chen Chen's attitude, Red Cell also gave up the idea of friendly dialogue and said directly, we want to bring our own people back. Is he still alive? It's a pity that he's dead. He was the commander, right? He and Bai Yingning were used as bargaining chips for surrender. When we saw him, his skull had already flown away to who knows where. Chen Chen lied without changing his expression or heartbeat. This was not a sign of weakness, but simply an attempt to avoid unnecessary trouble. Red Blood Cell obviously didn't intend to pursue the matter too much. He just nodded and continued to ask, where is he? Where is his body? Just buried it. You should have come earlier, so we wouldn't have to dig the hole. That we went to Lao Fa Jia Trading Company first. I have to say that your tactics are brilliant. Red Blood Cell paused for a moment, as if thinking and recalling something, and then he continued, using a pump to spray fluid fuel is indeed a good idea. Perhaps it will become a tactic that will be popularized in small-scale battles in the future. JFT has also studied similar CQB tactics, such as powder fuel throwing, but it is obvious that it cannot compare to direct liquid fuel in terms of coverage area and suppression force. But I think the safety of this strategy is too low. Don't talk nonsense. Chen Chen interrupted him again and said, after we leave, you can go dig him out and take him away. But you have to give me something. This is totally unreasonable. We have already lost an important person, and now we just want to get the body back. And you actually want us to pay a higher price. What about the Geneva Convention? What about the Hague Convention? What about the humanitarian spirit? That you're talking to me about this? I'll just burn him to death. He's just a mercenary anyway. Chen Chen paused and said, no, he's not dead at all. He's in my car. I just treated him to a meal. Well, if you don't bring something out, I'll take him away. The red blood cells fell silent. Chen Chen had no intention of giving in because he had already grasped the other party's psychology. In fact, according to CIU's information, the Shadow Legion is still just a small-scale commercial PMC organization. They have close ties with MPRI, but have not yet established ties with the CIA. The appearance of their people in Lao Fa Jia Trading Company is indeed just a business behavior, or it is still a business behavior for the time being. They may know what the old business firm has done, but they basically did not participate. They are not qualified. However, if all the main parties involved died, if the MPRI background of the Shadow Corps was exposed, and if some things were forcibly linked, then they would never be able to clear themselves of the charges. This is obviously not the result their top leaders want, so they really have to get the body back. What do you want? Leave your car behind. Chen Chen spoke decisively. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much our J8 is worth? Impossible. If you are not sincere in your offer, then there is no need to talk anymore. Let's start the fight. You can kill me right now, but I have to tell you that you will face endless revenge. We are not mercenaries. We are a regular PMC company. The Shadow Corps will not let you go, and neither will MPRI, even. Red Blood Cell didn't finish his words, but Chen Chen could indeed understand what he meant. This is indeed a very powerful threat, but its power lies not in danger, but in trouble. Defeating a Shadow Corps is not a big deal. Just like with the current strength of the Dongfeng Corps, it is not difficult to defeat Chai Zili's northern Myanmar branch. But what happens after that? Then the overwhelming troubles are about to come to you. Therefore, it is best not to be too radical unless you are completely hostile. Asking for J8 is a bit too much, so you are using 416 Hong Kong dollars, right? The red blood cell was stunned for a moment and did not answer. But this is the default. Your 416 Hong Kong dollars shouldn't be too expensive, right? Default again. Leave the gun here. Losing a gun on the battlefield, this? Wrong. It's normal wear and tear during training. That can? The red blood cell finally nodded. He then picked up the walkie-talkie and issued instructions to the team members waiting in the rear. For the 416 Hong Kong dollars was thrown into the open space in front of J8. Chen Chen smiled with satisfaction and said, after we leave, you can go and dig out the body. Go ahead, drive your car out of my sight. If you have nothing to do, go help the fire department put out the fire. The red blood cell shook his head, as if he wanted to say something, but eventually turned and left. But after taking a few steps, he suddenly turned back, and Chen Chen's finger on the trigger almost pulled it. However, he just said one sentence. One day, we will have a dialogue as equals. Chen Chen frowned. The red blood cell's implication could not be more obvious. So he answered, you'd better not look forward to that day. Just do your job as a PMC. When you feel you can have an equal dialogue with us, that will be the end of you. The red blood cell was stunned for a moment, then turned and left. Chen Chen sneered and continued shouting. Don't forget to leave the spare magazine too. His voice lowered, and he added silently. What level? He uses the same gun as me. The Shadow Legion came and went in a hurry and just left like that. In fact, their actions were also consistent with Chen Chen's stereotype of them. A PMC that is well-equipped, highly trained, and has strong combat capabilities, but can only play when the situation is favorable. They always do some seemingly high-end jobs like security, rescue, escort, etc., and look down on the barbaric missions of local mercenaries. But in fact, they themselves still have a big gap in real fighting will and tactical hardness, let alone compared with the Dongfeng Corps, even compared with the former Lion Corps. They can fight, but they never consider fighting as their first choice. In a sense, I am in the same boat with Chase Li. Well, the sense of rules is too strong. If Chen Chen encountered a similar situation as today, he would never make any deal with others. What? A dead body? I launched a napalm attack, and then ran away. Where are the bodies? Isn't that a pile of charcoal? Of course, this is just a rough example, but from this example, we can clearly see the differences between the Shadow Corps, Chase Li, and Dongfeng Corps. After the Shadow Corps left, Chen Chen quickly organized everyone to evacuate. The spoils have been collected, and 4 HK-416s have been obtained. The funny thing is that these 4 guns are not much different from the state of brand new ones. Chen Chen shook his head and said, these people in the Shadow Corps are almost the same as Chase Li when he first met us. Though we were not as good as them at that time, at least they did have experience in several small-scale conflicts. But this doesn't mean they are really weak. The Shadow Corps is quite special. Right now, these people are an advanced team. If they can find a way out, it will be easy for MPRI to replace them. More importantly, if you dig deeper, they might also have what you have. Good job. The Jackal actually said the exact same words as the red blood cells. But Chen Chen didn't care at all. He opened his mouth and answered, then give it a try. My opinion is very simple anyway. If you can kill one, you can kill a group. All problems were solved, and the Dongfeng Corps quickly withdrew from Banglong. They did not encounter any obstacles during the process, thanks to the evacuation route that Chen Chen had planned long ago, and of course the power they demonstrated in the Battle of Banglong was also a factor. Are you kidding? Overnight? No. In a quarter of an hour, the two largest businesses were destroyed, and the participants of the Bangning's business who were dispersed even ran to the city to call the police. But the question is, how dare the police camp take care of this matter? Not to mention Banglung and northern Myanmar, no police would dare to intervene in this matter anywhere in the world. It's a low-profile carpet bombing and rocket air strikes. The police camp is relying on its shabby equipment and paid soldiers whose guns are not even stable. Do you dare to fight? It is better to report to your superiors first and then wait for support without stopping them. Even if they blame you, you can still convince your superior by saying, I can't stop it. But if they really went to stop them, whether they were trying to convince the group of mercenaries or the King of Hell, it seemed that the difficulty would be about the same. So, after confirming that the Dongfeng Corps had left, the Banglong Police Battalion finally arrived. The gunshots were sporadic, and it was obvious that they had no intention of hitting anyone. Or maybe not. Maybe some unlucky guy ended up being the scapegoat? But this was not a problem Chen Chen needed to worry about. The convoy headed east, then turned south near Menanchuang. In 20 minutes, the Dongfeng Corps responded to the camp near Hukou again. According to Chen Chen's plan, they will wait in this camp for more than 3 days to observe the changes in the situation in Lao Kai, especially paying attention to the dynamics of the Allied forces, the coup forces, the Myanmar army, and the Kachin people themselves, looking for possible opportunities. He believed that such an opportunity would definitely come. After all, the fighting on the front line was not going well, and his son died. Chen Chen didn't believe that Bai Suocheng could still remain calm. In fact, just as Chen Chen expected, Bai Suocheng had indeed gone crazy. As soon as he received the news that Lao Fa Jia Trading Company had been attacked, he immediately had an extremely ominous premonition in his heart. He almost immediately sent his personal soldiers to support because he knew that the police battalion in Banglong was useless. And he also knew that anyone who dared to attack the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company was definitely not an ordinary character. Not to mention the police battalion. It was still unknown how long his own soldiers could hold out, but even if it was a battle of added fuel to the fire, he had to bite the bullet and fight. As long as we can hold on for 2 hours until we can mobilize a large force for support, the problem will be solved. No matter how big the loss is, it doesn't really matter. But soon, he found that his idea had failed. Because less than 2 minutes after his personal soldiers set out, a piece of news that made him shudder came again. A fire broke out in the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company, and all the security personnel were trapped. Those who tried to break out were suppressed by heavy firepower and suffered heavy losses. This news is so representative that it can even be said that this is the symbol of one's enemy. Big fire, heavy firepower, high-efficiency Dongfeng Corps, it's Dongfeng Corps again. What the hell are you doing? I just confirmed your identity, and I haven't even figured out your purpose yet, and you've already come to kill me? Who are you working for? What is your purpose? There were no answers to the questions one after another, and Bai Suocheng didn't have time to think too much. He knew that it was too late even for his personal soldiers to go there, and he had to mobilize the most responsive mercenary groups in the city. Those people were willing to do anything for money. As long as they paid enough money, even if they couldn't help, they could still relieve the pressure on the business and help the trapped people break out, right? So, he really used all his connections to contact the mercenary group, but something that shocked him happened again. There are more than a dozen large and small mercenary groups in Banglong, plus a bunch of messy gangs and gun groups that may not even have names, a total of more than 1,000 people, but only 2 mercenary groups dare to take on his mission. Those who refused him all said the same thing. I don't want to die. So how fierce was it? And to what extent did it fight? Bai Suocheng simply couldn't imagine how a small mercenary group could scare more than 1,000 people away from taking action. It wasn't until the news came that the Bangning's business was attacked at the same time and more than a dozen buildings in a manner were razed to the ground by covering fire that he finally realized that things were not that simple. He kept increasing his chips and finally persuaded 4 mercenary groups to go to the Lao Fa Jia Trading Company for rescue. But by this time, 20 minutes had passed. Slow, too slow. When the mercenaries arrived, all they saw was the still raging fire and corpses on the ground. Their son was not among the corpses. When this result was confirmed, Bai Suocheng breathed a sigh of relief. But soon, he heard a rumor from the mercenaries who came to support him that made him furious. Bai Yingning is dead. He was shot dead by his adjutant himself and used as a bargaining chip for surrender. Although the released captives tried their best to deny the rumor, they wanted to prove that Bai Yingning was still alive and had just been abducted. However, how could someone as smart as Bai Suocheng not guess the truth of the matter? His son must be dead. His life was exchanged for the lives of these ants. The order to massacre was issued in an instant, and all the escaped prisoners became targets. And this is the most ironic point in the whole thing. The mercenary group he sent out was originally planning to rescue, but after all the rescue, their final mission turned out to be to clean up their own people. Under the intense, emotional ups and downs, Bai Suocheng felt that he was almost fainting. The adjutant at the side held the water cup tightly in his hand and did not dare to say a word for a long time. It was not until Bai Suocheng finally caught his breath that he handed the water over and said, "Sir, don't worry. Nothing has been determined yet. Master, Bai may not be in trouble. Haven't we confirmed this before? They don't have any background in the North. Besides, the way they do things is definitely not like the North. They're just a mercenary group. In this case, they will definitely not dare to go to war with us because that would mean that they are at loggerheads with the Burmese." Stop talking. Bai Suocheng interrupted him with a cold expression and then continued. Whether they have it or not, they won't admit it. That sounds good. The Dongfeng Corps is instructed by the Allied forces in everything they do. But I don't understand. Would such a team listen to the Allied forces so much? If you have the ability, can't you just go and join Hua State? It might be true that there is no background in the North. But no background does not necessarily mean no connection. This is an open plot. We will raise in Dongfeng Corps and let them fight us to the death. No matter who wins or loses, they will reap the benefits. It was fine after killing Wei Chaoren, but now you're targeting me? Do you really think I have no ability at all? Even rabbits bite when they are anxious. Don't I bite people too? Damn it. Get some people for me. I'm going to beat them all to death. What Dongfeng Core? D. Bai Suoqing's expression was distorted and his voice was hysterical. The adjutant looked at him hesitantly and asked, will they not interfere? Impossible. There is no way they would interfere. Even if I intervene, it's only indirect. Hurry. We must hurry. Don't give them time to react. As long as we destroy the Dongfeng Core, the matter is settled, and we will have no more worries. Send your personal soldiers over to chase them. No matter where they come from. Find them and kill them all. Clear. The adjutant answered immediately, but then said, if that's the case, then our defense is empty. Sir, do you want to take shelter first? Hearing this, Bai Suoqing's eyes froze. After a few seconds of silence, he said, let's go. I'll go first, and I'll come back when this is over. The large-scale mobilization of Bai Suoqing's personal soldiers could not fail to attract attention. In fact, just 1 hour after he made the decision, Chen Chen received a call from Xiaoyu. And the few words Xiaoyu said on the phone were also very simple. She said, I didn't expect you to kill Bai Yingning. This was totally beyond our plan. Bai Suoqing has already started mobilizing troops, and he will also hide himself. Your situation is not good. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is that this is too big a matter. Your mission ends here. Someone will pay the commission. The good news is, our cooperation ended ahead of schedule. How is it good news that the cooperation ended early? When Xiaoyu said this, even Chen Chen was a little slow to react. After all, the only thing on his mind was the helicopter, and the termination of the mission meant that he had not had time to complete the ultimate goal and would not be able to get what he wanted. Yes, someone will definitely pay the commission, but the commission is not what he wants. However, a few seconds after Xiaoyu hung up the phone, Chen Chen suddenly reacted. This mission was actually destined to end early. This is because no matter who they are, it is impossible for them to have any direct connection with the situation in northern Myanmar. Once the mission continues, those involved will fall into a vicious circle of abnormal interactions. Now that the mission is over, the Dongfeng Corps can completely let go and start a killing spree. As for the promised commission, Chen Chen believed that no one would deny it because his value was there. If he really defeated the coup army and made the allied forces obedient, the benefits that those who were interested could get would far exceed the total amount he would get. However, as Xiaoyu said, this was good news but also bad news. The good news is that once the Dongfeng Corps puts on the mask, they can act without any scruples and do whatever they want without any restraint. The bad news is that Chen Chen will no longer be able to get any real-time support from Xiaoyu. It is impossible either in terms of intelligence or equipment. The Dongfeng Corps itself can only rely on these 24, to be precise, 20 people. Thinking of this, Chen Chen walked towards a jackal in the distance and said, we are going to do something big. How about it? Do you still want to participate? If you want, then follow us. If not, it's just right that when you return to Munka, you can take our wounded back with you. Hearing Chen Chen's words, Jackal couldn't help but frown. Of course, he could guess what the big thing Chen Chen was talking about was, and he also knew the complicated consequences that such a big thing might bring. From a rational point of view, he should not bring Chase's employees to get involved in such matters. But the problem is that the battle at Lao Fa Jia Trading Company was so shocking to him. It was not because of the fantastic idea of using a fire truck to spray gasoline, but because of Chen Chen's exquisite control of time and offensive rhythm. As the saying goes, the layman watches the excitement while the expert watches the details. While others only saw the raging fire and the shocking explosion effects, he saw the more essential core hidden behind it. And this kind of core really has a fatal attraction to him. In other words, it has a fatal attraction to all warriors active on the battlefield. After hesitating for a long time, the jackal finally answered, let's keep going. It doesn't matter. You guys are the ones who should bear the blame. We can't reveal our identities anyway. The only problem is the danger. But how can mercenaries not be dangerous? It's worth it. Okay, then I'll arrange for the wounded to be evacuated. Wait a minute. What's the plan? We go straight to Old Street? That's not the case. Chen Chen shook his head, unfolded the map in his hand, and then said, according to the intelligence we obtained from the previous reconnaissance, there are actually a total of 6 large-scale teams near the Old Street. Border Defense Battalion, Police Battalion, Bai Suoqing's private soldiers, Lu Guoxi's private soldiers, Lu Jingxiang's private soldiers, and a mountain combat battalion of the Mountain Brigade of the Xingwei camp in Myanmar. All these forces have about 1,000 people. The Border Defense Battalion was defeated by us once, and now has less than 1,000 people. Having said that, Chen Chen drew a circle on the map and continued. Right now, the Border Defense Battalion, Mountain Battalion, and part of Bai Suoqing's private soldiers are carrying out bandit suppression missions in the Taman village area. They are far away from Lao Kai and basically have no ability to return for defense. Lu Guoxi's private soldiers are extremely weak in combat effectiveness and are not to be feared at all. Lu Jingxiang's forces are located outside the Old Street. He is a typical fence sitter and cannot withstand a fight at all. So that means if we want to attack Laojia, we will actually only face 2 powerful enemies. The Police Battalion and Bai Suoqing's private army. In theory, it is possible to launch a direct attack on Lao Kai, but we can only cause losses to the enemy, and it is difficult to achieve meaningful results, and decapitation is even more impossible. So, harassment and assault are not within our consideration. What we really want to fight is still a war of annihilation. What do you mean? 20 or so people against thousands of people, and you tell me we want to fight a war of annihilation? Jackal was completely stunned. Not only him, but other members of the core group of the Dongfeng Corps were also stunned. No matter how exaggerated the previous battle examples were, they were based on facts and had the conditions for victory. But now, with such a small number of people, if you want to fight a war of annihilation, isn't it too exaggerated? Looking at their expressions, Chen Chen shook his head and explained, I'm not talking about the General Annihilation War or the Tiamu Mountain Battle. Ah, the jackal shook his head. He had indeed never heard of it. But he hadn't heard of it, but Bao Qi had. Bao Qi's eyes immediately lit up, and then he asked, Are we going to fight a war of annihilation? Yes, mobile annihilation or guerrilla annihilation warfare. The goal is not to truly annihilate, but to cause as much casualties as possible, break up the enemy's organization, inflict heavy casualties on them, and then take advantage of the enemy's disorganized organization and disperse forces to try to destroy the enemy's main force. The fighting spirit of these ethnic armed groups in northern Myanmar cannot be compared with Chiang Kai-shek's. We won't be able to defeat them in a few months. Maybe a few days will be enough. Clear. Bao Qi nodded vigorously and then asked, But this will make our logistics supply a big problem. We still have enough ammunition, including more than 2 base stocks of grenades and rockets. But 2 bases of ammunition are really not enough for us to fight. I guess they can only support 2 medium-sized battles. Do we still need to establish a logistical supply line? Chen Chen shook his head. The essence of guerrilla warfare is to abandon bulky logistical supplies and use a lightweight structure to achieve rapid mobility. This is actually very difficult to achieve. We don't have a mass base, and the core of the supply shortage is not daily necessities, but weapons and ammunition. That means we really have to fight. Keep fighting, keep capturing points, keep snatching things from the enemy. So, the plan is very clear. There are hundreds of sentry posts near Lao Kai. These sentry posts form the supply lines for the armed forces of all parties in Kokong. We will use the sentry posts as fulcrums and launch our own leapfrog tactics. After determining the tactics, the Dongfeng Corps arranged for the evacuation of the wounded and then immediately prepared to set off. They didn't even stop for an extra minute. After all the vehicles had refueled, the refueling truck from Mungka was removed from the convoy, which stabilized the number of vehicles in the entire convoy at 7. 2 F-150 grenade pickups, 1 Dongfeng Mengshi, 2 machine gun pickups, a machine gun jeep, plus a pickup truck carrying an M120 mortar. All vehicles have basic off-road capabilities and passability, and all vehicles have a full fuel range of more than 600 kilometers. And this is the basis for Chen Chen to conduct mobile warfare or motorized warfare. The convoy left Hako and headed northwest along a small road. Their first target was a large sentry post near Gongnong. It was actually a military camp of the Burmese army, which was once used by the Mountain Combat Regiment of the Xingwei Brigade. However, after Kokong surrendered and the ethnic armed groups completed their reorganization, the camp was also in a semi-idle state. There were less than 50 defenders left, with only light weapons and very little ammunition. Logically speaking, Chen Chen should not choose this kind of target as the first stop, but this camp has an advantage that no other outpost can replace. That is, it is really a military camp. In the military camp, there must be a battle map and a radio station that can communicate with other troops. Information, in guerrilla warfare, nothing is more important than information. If you can grasp the enemy's movements, then guerrilla warfare can be carried out very smoothly. This is the terrifying thing about electromagnetic dominance. Sitting in the warrior car, Chen Chen took a few deep breaths to calm his slightly accelerated heartbeat. As he fought one tough battle after another, he could now fully appreciate the progress of this body. If his previous life was still used as the standard, his condition and combat quality had recovered to at least 90% of the level. Moreover, he did not feel any ceiling or bottleneck at all. This means that in terms of individual combat capabilities, he does have the potential to reach higher levels. Chen Chen had a faint smile on his face. Shirdecai, who was sitting next to him, looked at him curiously and asked, Captain, what are you laughing at? Before Chen Chen could answer, the white dog behind him gave the answer in advance. Don't ask. If you ask, it means you are thinking of something happy. All right. Shirdecai shook his head and asked again, Captain, what is our core purpose in this battle? I mean, how long will the battle last? It's impossible for us to keep fighting like this until all the enemies here are wiped out, right? No need to bother. Chen Chen held the previously seized 416 Hong Kong dollars in his hand, removed the magazine, pulled the bolt a few times, and after confirming that there were no major problems, handed it to Bao Qi. For the time being, you should use the Type 81 rifles. After this battle, you can switch to the 416 Hong Kong dollars rifles after completing adaptive training. This time, we just need to make the enemy collapse internally. The Kokong forces are not a monolithic entity. They will collapse sooner or later. Bai Suoching must have escaped. Just because we can't find him doesn't mean that no one can find him. Once the coup troops are truly hurt, someone will definitely kill Bai Suoching in order to stop the fighting. Shirdecai nodded thoughtfully and continued to ask, will Peng Diren come back? He should not continue to split, but accept the reorganization of Lao Myanmar. So what? It doesn't matter. Reorganization is just a formality. As long as he obeys, we will reorganize him. As they were talking, the convoy had already arrived near the Gunong military camp. Under the strategic premise of motorized warfare, individual soldiers' covert reconnaissance is too slow and affects the efficiency of guerrilla warfare. Therefore, as the protection center of the entire convoy, the Mengshi vehicle took the lead and rushed directly to the main entrance of the Gunong military camp. The sentries standing guard outside were completely stunned. They didn't know who was coming, nor did they know their purpose. That's right, under the backward intelligence system of the old Burmese, they didn't even know what this warrior vehicle represented. Chen Chen didn't waste time talking to him. When the other party came over with a gun in hand, he lowered the car window and shouted in his unskilled Burmese, "Open the door!" His original intention was to scare the other party, but it was obvious that without identity recognition, even the low-level soldiers of the old Burmese would not be so stupid as to have no IQ at all. A series of Burmese words came out of the sentry's mouth. Chen Chen realized that the scam could not go on, so he immediately raised his arm. The 416 Hong Kong dollars made a loud bang, and the sentry, who had no time to react, fell to the ground on the spot. Then everyone filed out. This was a strategy that Chen Chen had planned long ago. They could not use heavy firepower coverage without thinking at any time, because this battle would last for quite a long time, and they had no chance and no way to replenish the precious ammunition. Key items must be reserved for key bosses. Is it necessary to use heavy firepower to attack a dilapidated military camp? The 5 men who got off the warrior vehicle were fully equipped with armor. After Li Bang quickly threw 2 smoke bombs to divide the battlefield, the guards who were just attracted by the gunshots were completely confused. They had just woken up from their lazy sleep. But what greeted them was not the scolding of the superior, but the muzzle of a gun spewing flames. In just a dozen seconds, more than 10 people fell down. And then, the machine gun pickup truck following closely behind the Mengshi vehicle also began to show its power. The 4 sentries on the guard platforms in the military camp were knocked down by large-caliber bullets before they could even react. Perhaps in the last moment before their death, they would resent the sentry at the door for not letting these killers in directly. In that case, at least he would have a chance to surrender. The battle proceeded quickly, and in less than 2 minutes, the entire camp was cleared. Those soldiers who were resting had no intention of resisting at all. They all dropped their weapons, lined up, and walked out of the barracks and surrendered with their hands raised. Chen Chen did not make things difficult for them. Of course, another reason was that he did not intend to waste ammunition here. Search for ammunition supplies and restock ammunition. Where's the radio station? Have you found the map? Found it. Bao Qi got into the car with the radio in his arms. Chen Chen nodded slightly, handed 2 white phosphorus grenades to the surrendering officer, and then said to him, "Burn down the arsenal." The officer looked up blankly, but finally took the grenade, pulled the ring, and threw it into the only remaining arsenal in the camp. Flames rose instantly, and the Dongfeng Corps evacuated quickly. It took a total of 4 minutes and 30 seconds from entering to leaving. And behind them, a main outpost had been reduced to ashes. The convoy turned around and headed east. And at this time, Bao Qi had already debugged the Myanmar radio station. He disguised himself as the camp commander and sent out a short and irregular distress signal. A moment later, the enemy's dispatch information was fed back. Information is confusing and fragmented. But from the fragmented information, Chen Chen still heard key intelligence. Bai Suoqing's personal soldiers are heading from Banglong to Gunong. They're chasing us. Let's go south to Mandalay village and launch a counterattack there. On the bank of the Nujung River, Chen Chen stared at the team of 100 people crossing the river, feeling somewhat puzzled. He didn't know what these people were thinking, nor did he know where they got the courage from. They actually planned to rely on these soldiers who obviously had no high degree of organization to intercept a ferocious mercenary group that had already made a name for itself in northern Myanmar. Fortune and wealth can only be achieved through risk, but this is not the way to seek it, right? Perhaps it was just the master's order. Chen Chen didn't think much about it. His finger was already on the trigger. Everyone, be prepared to attack. Give them some time. Wait until everyone is ashore before attacking. Seek maximum damage. Avoid using heavy weapons as much as possible to save ammunition. Bao Qi, use a 04 grenade to fire a burst of shots to destroy all vehicles. We don't seek annihilation, but we want to deprive them of their ability to pursue. Clear. Chen Chen's order was given, and everyone responded immediately. After a 10-second countdown, the first shot was fired from the 416 Hong Kong dollars in Chen Chen's hand. Then, the entire convoy drove out from the reverse slope, machine guns began to spew flames, and rifles set to single-shot mode hit the enemy's vital points one by one. Shurdekai's M82A1 pierced the hood of a pickup truck, and the flying metal fragments directly pierced the 2 people behind the car to the ground. The 04 grenade in Bao Qi's hand began to show its power. After 2 shots to correct the landing point, the next 10 grenades all landed at the designated positions. 4 trucks and 4 pickup trucks were reduced to ashes before they could even form a formation. The soldiers who hastily jumped off the vehicles didn't even have time to figure out the direction of the bullets before they were knocked to the ground by a round of intensive scattered fire from 2 heavy machine guns. The casualties reached their peak 30 seconds after the battle began. When these soldiers finally realized the danger and began to look for cover, the pace of the battle was forced to slow down. Chen Chen also realized that this was actually the purpose of this group of personal soldiers. They were not meant to be hunted down at all. They were a bait to bite the prey. Bai Suoqing was planning to use their lives to delay the Dongfeng Corps and create opportunities for the large forces behind. It must be said that his plan was effective. Because no matter how strong the Dongfeng Corps is, it takes time to fight an annihilation war in the wild. These people only need to hold on for about 20 minutes before the subsequent support troops can arrive. By that time, bite after bite, one after another, the Dongfeng Corps will be bitten to death on the spot sooner or later. This is a vicious plan, a vicious plot that cost the lives of his own men. If it were any other team, if the commander hesitated for even a few minutes, the battle situation would change, and the advantage that was hard-earned would be wiped out in an instant. However, the Dongfeng Corps is not any other mercenary group, and Chen Chen is not any other commander. After all the vehicles were blown up, he gave the order without any hesitation. Everyone get in the vehicles and evacuate. Li Bang, throw smoke bombs to block the enemy's shooting range. Clear. The well-trained mercenaries boarded the vehicles as quickly as possible. And then the driver, who had already put his foot on the accelerator, started off suddenly, and the entire convoy sped away along the path. Bai Suocheng's personal soldiers behind him were all stunned. They still didn't know what had happened. You get hit for no apparent reason, and then the enemy walks away for no apparent reason? It's like being slapped in the face by a stranger on the street. You want to fight back, but the other person has already disappeared into the crowd. What the hell is this? The people who survived the disaster looked around and saw that there were only about 80 people left out of the original team of more than 100 people. This slap was indeed a bit heavy. However, Chen Chen had no time to think about whether the slap was heavy or not, because through the mobilization of this team of personal soldiers, plus the information from the military radio station, he had basically figured out Bai Suocheng's troop deployment situation. His private soldiers were divided into two halves. One half was sent to suppress bandits in the Hongyan direction, and the other half was originally stationed in Laojia. Now, the half stationed in Lao Kai has been transferred out, and their purpose is obviously to support Banglong. Banglong is no longer worthy of support, so the next step is that they will definitely pursue their own side. He wanted to use bait to chase the Dongfeng Corps, but wasn't the Dongfeng Corps trying to keep him hooked with battles along the way? From the Gunong camp to the ambush on the Nujiang Shallows. Next, the Dongfeng Corps must take a route that is sufficiently attractive. Attack the enemy and disrupt the entire deployment of the Ku army and the Myanmar army. Since this is to be done, the next outpost that needs to be broken is already obvious. Mangdamba Artillery Range, the headquarters of the Burmese Army's Mountain Warfare Battalion. Now, almost all the mountain battalions have gone out to Hongyan to suppress the bandits. Their defenses are empty, with only a police battalion nearby to provide assistance. Isn't this a difficult fight? Full speed ahead. We are heading to Lao Kai, near the Mangdamba Artillery Range. We stole the mountain camp's lair, and then we'll find a way to mess up Old Street. Clear. The replies from the team leaders came through the headphones, but then new questions arose. Captain, which way are we going? Towards Manka or Manda? These are the only two fast routes from Lao Kai to Banglong and Gunong. Under the premise of high mobility mobile operations, the Dongfeng Corps must choose one of them. After a few seconds of silence, Chen Chen said, "Let's go to Manda." Bai Suocheng's private soldiers went from Manda to Banglong, and they will definitely not set up roadblocks on this road. There is a time difference between us and them, about 40 minutes, which is enough. By the time they catch up to us, we'll have already finished the artillery range. Clear. The leading Mingxia car suddenly accelerated. Lenny turned the steering wheel, and the car drove on a Highway 34 on the south side of Qingshui River, and then crossed the Mandalay Clock Tower Bridge into the urban area of Gunong. There were several policemen from the police battalion stationed on the bridge, but when they saw the terrifying howitzers and heavy machine guns mounted on the convoy, they didn't even want to reach out to stop it. Are you kidding me? The Gunong military camp on the other side of the river is still on fire. Stop them. Are you trying to kill yourself? As a result, the Dongfeng Corps' convoy successfully passed the bridge, bypassed the Gunong urban area to the west, turned back to the northeast and drove onto the Manda Highway, heading all the way to the Mangdamba artillery range. They were driving very fast. Lenny was not an experienced driver at all. He did not consider the life of the vehicle or its performance limit when he stepped on the accelerator. The only thing he did was to step on the accelerator into the fuel tank while he was still able to hold the steering wheel. The team only took 20 minutes to cover the distance of 25 kilometers. The average speed was close to 80 kilometers per hour, which may not seem fast, but you have to know that they were not driving on the national highway in the north, but on this semi-paved road that can be seen everywhere in northern Myanmar. So, this speed can be considered crazy. And from the monitoring situation of the radio station, it can be judged that Bai Suocheng's private soldiers can no longer catch up. They were still in pursuit, but as the Dongfeng Corps sped along, they blew up several roadside outposts along the way. Bai Suocheng, who was hiding somewhere and commanding remotely, also felt a strong sense of crisis. Dispatch. Police battalion. Return to defense. Protect the old street. There were intermittent call signs coming from the radio, and a smile appeared on Chen Chen's lips. Sure enough, I was fooled. They thought they could take advantage of the fact that the defense of Old Street was weak to attack it and try to end the war in one fell swoop. But how is this possible? You guys overestimate me, don't you? How can 20 people fight Laojia? Do you really think every member of the Dongfeng Corps is a Rambo? Mongdong Dam is the real purpose. At this time, the convoy was only 1 kilometer away from Mongdong Dam. Chen Chen ordered all personnel to stop the car and occupy the commanding heights on the northwest ridge. The Burmese Army observation post, also located near the northwest ridge, did not hold out for more than 30 seconds. After the observation post was cleared, the artillery camp below fell into complete chaos. At this time, there were less than 300 soldiers left in the barracks. The police camp had been transferred away, and even Lu Jingxiang's private soldiers, who were originally stationed on the outskirts of Laojia, were temporarily recruited to Laojia to assist in the defense. Mangdamba has become an isolated island, and what no one expected is that the first place to be attacked is actually this isolated island. What's the point? What's the point of fighting this thing? Do you still want to go to war with Myanmar? Do you still want to usurp the throne and get rid of Nu Chin and So Minu? They couldn't figure it out, and they didn't have time to think about it. Under the command of the commander, they quickly tried to organize a defense line and find shelter. But this was their last struggle, because it's too late. How long does it take to set up an artillery position? Maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or even faster? 2 minutes? But Chen Chen only needs 30 seconds. This was because the 107 rocket launcher in his hand did not require any messy adjustments to the parameters. Lower the muzzle, aim it downwards and blast it. As for the two Mk-19S and 104 howitzer, their effective range is over 1,500 meters, so just shoot them. Thus, the attack was launched in such a tight rhythm. The iconic bang-bang sound of the 107 fire was rang out, and 9 rockets were fired out instantly. The Mangdamba camp became a disaster. Unfortunately, several barracks were hit. The soldiers inside fled in panic, but soon the first round of grenade attacks arrived. 60 grenades landed in the military camp in an alarmingly scattered manner, and there was a chaotic sound of ghosts howling, blind gunfire, and even the explosion of grenades thrown for unknown reasons. Taking this opportunity, Chen Chen has already debugged his 120mm mortar. Without an artillery calculator or an optical steering wheel, he simply used an ordinary scientific calculator that he had picked up and carried with him to complete the calculations. Such calculation results cannot be very accurate, but they are good enough. Distance 1,500 meters, cold cannon firing, pull rope to fire. Boom! The M933 high-explosive bomb whizzed down towards the enemy position, and after flying for several seconds, it exploded at a very precise angle in the center of the crowd in the densely packed barracks on the north side of the military camp. Under the night sky, blood mist was flying. Chen Chen quickly adjusted the steering gear, then personally picked up a shell and stuffed it into the barrel. This time, he didn't go to see the explosion. Go! Retreat! The still-hot mortar was dismantled again, and then carefully placed on the pickup truck. Without any unnecessary steps, the convoy once again moved away from the position from which they had launched their attack. It still took them less than 5 minutes to clear the ridge outpost and complete the artillery evacuation. The Mangdamba military camp below had just resumed effective command at this time. Military vehicles drove out of the camp and chased in the direction of the Dongfeng Corps. Chen Chen dropped a few broadswords on the road they had to take, and then drove the car down the ridge, but he did not escape to the north. Instead, he made a move that the Burmese army could never have guessed. He ran straight to the south where the Burmese army was chasing him, and turned into a mountain path in a fraction of a second. Then he turned off all the lights and hid in the valley at the corner of the road, avoiding the pursuing Burmese army. The broadsword mine was quickly triggered, and after the explosion, Chen Chen started the convoy again. However, he only used the weak low beam of the leading car to illuminate, and the following car followed according to the reflective signs of the front car. The convoy quietly and silently bypassed the Burmese military vehicles that were blocked by the explosion and drove towards the old area outside Lao Kai. The Burmese army in Mangdamba probably thought that the Dongfeng Corps had fled to the north. Aren't these broadswords used to delay the pursuit? However, this did not cause much damage at all. At this time, in a villa in Manjiu, Lu Jingxiang was looking at the map in front of him anxiously. Most of his private soldiers had just been transferred to participate in the so-called Laojie defense war, but he really didn't know what the point of fighting such a defense war was. It's obviously you by Sawaching, who has the grudge against the Dongfeng soldiers. Why are you looking for us? If you hadn't used them as cannon fodder, if your men hadn't killed their families, would these bastards from the Dongfeng Corps have been so relentless in their revenge? To be fair, Lu Jingxiang really didn't think the Dongfeng Corps had done anything wrong. If I were in their shoes, my reaction would probably be more intense and my methods would be more cruel. After all, this crappy place is full of cruelty and brutality. If you are wronged and don't know how to resist, it won't be long before you are crushed to death by others. Therefore, from the very beginning, Lu Jingxiang actually had no intention of participating in such a complicated struggle and battle. What allied forces? What Dongfeng Corps? What by Sawaching? None of them have anything to do with me. I just want to make money. I just want to follow a good brother and make a fortune in peace. You said you want to get rid of Peng Jiaxing. Okay, then get rid of him. But now he has been removed. Why is there no chance to make a fortune? Why are you still fighting without sleep? When will this miserable life end? Lu Jingxiang sighed deeply, with a helpless look on his face. In fact, he has always been very clear about his position. He is a fence-sitter. Once the wind changes, he will quickly follow. Many times, I would try to avoid getting involved in things that are too radical, such as the arms business done by the Bai family, or the human trafficking that the Wei family had been involved in. Even when Peng Jiaxing was still around, although he also joined the drug trafficking, he was indeed considered to be one of the drug dealers with relatively gentle methods. Of course, he himself knew very well that this was not because he was so kind, but purely a means of self-protection. I deserve to die, but the problem is I can't just mindlessly get involved in something you did for nothing and then die inexplicably, right? I can't get involved in this mess anymore. We must bring the team back. God knows who is strong and who is weak right now. Considering the fighting power of the Dongfeng Corps and the possible backgrounds behind them, what if they liberate Laojie tomorrow? Will it be too late to surrender by then? You have to have foresight. Even if we cannot surrender now, we must do what a fence-sitter should do. Thinking of this, Lu Jingxiang picked up the phone without hesitation and dialed a number that he had already memorized. Peng Diren's number. He wanted to discuss the terms with the other party and find out what the other party was willing to say. Only by figuring out everyone's intentions can you seize the best opportunity. The phone rang twice and then was connected. Lu Jingxiang said, "Hello," but before he could continue speaking, a strange whistling sound suddenly pierced his ears. It was like a mortar. Lu Jingxiang was stunned and subconsciously raised his head. The next second, the fierce air wave distorted his face and countless fragments penetrated his body. He flew up and fell down again. His life was slipping away quickly, and before his vision went completely black, a thought flashed through his mind. When gods fight, I'm going to be in trouble. Damn it. I didn't do anything. Why did I get blasted? Chen Chen only fired one shot at Lu Jingxiang's villa. He actually didn't know whether Lu Jingxiang was inside, let alone whether the power of the shot was enough to kill him. But it doesn't matter, because killing was not his purpose. All he wanted to do was to declare his existence to all the forces near Laojie. This was a strategy to lure the enemy, and he had to let everyone know his position. Because only when the bait is conspicuous enough, the fish that want to eat the bait will keep chasing and biting the hook. After reloading the mortars, the Dongfeng Corps retreated once again. According to the original plan, Chen Chen had intended to bypass Guanyin Mountain from the east side of the old street, advance towards Gongtang, and then further advance into Hongyan, relying on Peng Diren's strength to continue to maneuver. But through radio monitoring, he obtained a completely new piece of information. That is, Bai Suoqing's private soldiers were returning to Laojia. Due to the large number of personnel and relatively insufficient vehicles, they had to requisition a large number of various civilian trucks. Overall, the travel speed was very slow, and they had just arrived near Hobin. That is to say, they would cross the Qingshui River in about 10 minutes and arrive near Manda in about half an hour. This is an opportunity. There is a narrow valley with a length of 1 kilometer on the west side of Manda village, and the Manda highway passes through this valley. If they could launch an ambush here and open fire from the hillsides on both sides, the several hundred private soldiers of Bai Suoqing might really be wiped out by the 20 or so people of the Dongfeng Corps, because their formation was too bloated and their reaction speed was too slow. But the premise of all this must be based on the fact that the other party is completely unprepared. Bai Suoqing must be made to believe that his Dongfeng Corps is already fleeing northward and preparing to join the Allied forces. A feint attack is impossible. The combat effectiveness of the ethnic armed groups in northern Myanmar is weak, but that does not mean that their commanders are stupid. At least, Bai Suoqing is not stupid at all. The fact that he hid himself immediately after the war started is enough to explain the problem. Then, there is only one solution. Chen Chen took out the satellite phone and dialed Peng Diren's number. The call was quickly connected, and Peng Diren's slightly tired but excited voice came from the receiver. Hello? Uncle Jingxiang. No, I'm Chen Chen. Chen Chen. Commander Chen. You fought back? You fought back so quickly. Peng Diren's voice quickly turned into surprise. Chen Chen did not respond but said directly, the situation is urgent. I need your assistance. I just attacked the Burmese army's Mangdamba artillery range and blew up Lu Jingxiang. Oh, and I also killed Bai Yingning. It happened just a few hours ago. Now, we are near the old street, and I need your support. How many of you are there? Can you fight to Gongtang? We'll meet up there. Hearing Chen Chen's words, Peng Diren was stunned for a moment. Yes, he did receive news today that there were major changes near the old street, and that Bai Suoqing had made major adjustments. But the problem was that he could never imagine that the so-called major changes would be so big. What the hell? It was understandable that Bai Yingning died, probably because his business was destroyed and he was taken to the west with it. But, Mangdamba, although there are not many remaining garrison troops there is still a police battalion. Then there is Lu Jingxiang. No wonder he lost his voice halfway through the call, so you guys blew him up? This. Peng Diren couldn't help but stutter, but after a brief pause, he instantly realized that this was his perfect opportunity. The entire Laojia, the entire Kokong was in chaos. If we don't counterattack now, when will we wait? The Burmese Army's mountain battalion will definitely be transferred back, and the frightened remnants of the Border Defense Battalion are not a concern. Bai Suoqing's son has died. How can he not be afraid of death? Suppress the bandits? Think about how to save your own life first. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity that must be seized. I will immediately organize troops to attack Gongtang. Give me 5 hours, no 3 hours. I will take down the arch. Commander Chen, you must hold on for 3 hours. After we take over Gongtang, we will continue to move south to meet you. Okay, 3 hours. How soon can you launch an attack? We have a team near Taman village. We will set off in 10 minutes. No, the battle will begin in 10 minutes. We will spread the news and attract firepower for you. I understand. Thank you for your hard work. With a click, Chen Chen hung up the phone. He didn't plan to say too much to Peng Diren because he actually had no plan to go to Gongtang at all. This was just a decoy. He wanted to use Peng Diren's counterattack to make the various forces in Laojia think that they would go to Gongtang to join the Allied forces. However, this is not enough. So, Chen Chen continued to give orders. The 2 people in Group 6 who were slightly injured drive a pickup truck to the vicinity of Guanyin Mountain and abandon them. Then, abandon all equipment and evacuate on foot. Be careful not to draw attention. If you perform this mission well, your commission will be increased. Clear. The 2 people who were injured before responded immediately, and the convoy was divided into 2. Chen Chen led the main force and began to move rapidly towards Manda. In just 10 minutes, the convoy arrived at Manda again. Afterwards, all the vehicles drove onto the relatively flat reverse slopes on both sides of the hill to hide. All weapons were in place, and all the personnel held their guns tightly. 25 minutes. There are still 5 minutes before the time Chen Chen predicted that Bai Suoqing's private soldiers would arrive in Manda. These 5 minutes seemed extremely long. In fact, after 5 minutes, the Dongfeng Corps waited for another 5 minutes before finally seeing Bai Suoqing's private army, who had arrived late at the end of the road. The scale of this private army is really large, with at least 30 vehicles crowded together. Those who don't know would think they are participating in a large-scale parade. This is a very stupid marching strategy. In fact, when the troops' vehicles are marching, even on such a narrow road with poor road conditions, the front and rear vehicles must maintain a distance of at least 30 meters. Moreover, the most important thing when a convoy is moving is not to follow the car in front closely, but to pay attention to the car behind. Once the distance is too close or too far, timely reminders should be given. At the same time, reconnaissance vehicles should be arranged in front of the convoy, and light vehicles should be arranged on both sides of the road as mobile adjustment posts to prevent command confusion caused by loss of connection between the front and rear vehicles in sudden situations. But it is obvious that this team did not do even any of this. They drove slowly on the Manda Highway, like a tour group. In the most crowded places, the distance between the front and rear cars was less than 5 meters. They were too confident and thought their enemies had left. But the battle is not over yet. How can the enemy leave? The enemy will appear anywhere. Chen Chen let out a long sigh and finally confirmed the weapon preparation status. Soon a series of replies came from his headphones. Grenade team of 3 is ready. Battle launcher, 1 man ready. Recoilless gun, 1 man ready. Bazooka team of 4, get in position. 2 people take position for the fuel air bomb. 3 heavy machine gunners, get in position. The 4 members of the throwing team are in position. 2 snipers take position. 20 members of the Dongfeng Corps plus 4 members of the Chasely Corps were all in place. It was a bit exaggerated that 24 people only had 4 rifles in total, 2 of which were Chen Chen and Jackal's 416 Hong Kong dollars. There was no other way. An ambush was like this. After the first round of firepower output, the mercenaries of the Dongfeng Corps can use their rifles again. At this time, the convoy had already reached the predetermined attack position, with a length of nearly 300 meters. Chen Chen clenched the gun in his hand and ordered, "Start fighting." The rockets flew out of the barrels, and at the same time, the bazooka team also opened fire. The entire convoy was split in 2. The few cars at the end were all destroyed, and the middle section was completely burned into a sea of fire. The Bai family's private soldiers were stunned. After the violent explosion, 10 cars in the convoy were scrapped, and there were nearly 100 people sitting in these 10 cars who had not had time to get out. The combat casualties happened in an instant. The car in front noticed the change in the rear, and the driver immediately stepped on the accelerator to get out. This was another extremely stupid decision. If they didn't start at this time, would they be made into targets? So, they became targets. The vehicle-mounted grenades began to take effect, and the first wave of bullet rain fell on the road. The lead car was blown to the ground, blocking the entire road. Afterwards, Chen Chen issued further instructions. Howitzer fire extends backwards. Assault team ready. Simple infantry and artillery coordination, 100 meters away. Pay attention to the explosion point and follow the artillery assault along both sides of the road. Throwing team, hurry up and throw all the incendiary bombs in your hands. In fact, his instructions were just the last line of defense. Without his orders, Li Bang had already led the throwing team to charge forward. They rushed through a distance of 300 meters, throwing dozens of incendiary grenades, turning the entire convoy into a sea of fire. By this time, the attack had only been launched for less than 3 minutes. The convoy has indeed begun to deploy, but what's the use? They had lost their position and any chance of mounting a counterattack. The reduction in personnel has reached nearly 30%. Most importantly, these 30% of personnel include commanding personnel who were selected as high-value targets by Chen Chen and can no longer fight. 500 people, so what? The battle was actually over from the moment they made their first wrong move. This series of gunfire, roar, and burning was nothing more than a gorgeous elegy for their farewell. The outcome of a war is never decided after the gunshot. The Bai family's private soldiers began to flee. Chen Chen ordered not to pursue and to focus on those stubborn elements who still wanted to resist. Heavy body armor, night vision goggles, and seemingly endless amounts of projectiles. With only a basic amount of ammunition, all the private soldiers who had no chance to escape were wiped out. The entire battle lasted less than 30 minutes. No one came to support, because just now, Lu Jingxiang died and the Mangdamba military camp was attacked. Everyone was in Lao Street, and no one dared to come out to support and risk Lao Street being attacked. Bai Suoqing's private army was abandoned. This also means that his own life will not last long. At this time, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning, and the moon was falling in the sky. Hidden in the firelight and smoke, the moonlight as cold as flowing ice caressed the pale faces on the ground, stained with smoke and blood. Chen Chen stood on a high place and looked at the entire battlefield, and at this moment his phone rang. On the other end of the phone was a voice that was absolutely unfamiliar to him. Yum Bai Xiuhen. Chen Chen, that's enough. I got your number from Peng Diren, and we've already discussed it. Cease the fire. It will be of no benefit to us if we continue to fight. Hearing Bai Suoqing's words, Chen Chen was stunned. He never thought that Bai Suoqing would give in so easily. No, there was no way he would give in. This is just a delaying tactic. Bai Suoqing is not Lu Jingxiang, and he is not a fence-sitter. So Chen Chen smiled. He opened his mouth and answered. Are you thinking about how to ease the situation and then use the power of Lao Mian to kill me? Old White, you underestimate me. Do you think I'm the kind of person who can be fooled by just a few words? It has come to this point. There is no reason to stop. Tell me, how good would it be if you hadn't killed our family? It's too late to say anything now. We are a very trustworthy mercenary group. Life is a thing. I told you that your whole family should pay for it. So your whole family should pay for it. The bullet that Bai Suoqing shot 7 months ago would eventually hit the back of his head. Chen Chen gave him a sufficient and reasonable reason. That is revenge. This sounds outrageous. After all, in a world where interests come first, how could anyone really put so-called hatred first? For most of the tyrants, hatred is just a means to achieve their goals, or an excuse. However, from another perspective, in this poor place in northern Myanmar, this reason seems particularly reasonable. Especially when applied to mercenaries, it makes more sense. They have been living on a shaky basis, not knowing when they will die. Playing with women and having fun are all they have in their lives. Now that a family member has died, is it outrageous to seek revenge? Not outrageous at all. And this is actually the reason why Xiao Yu said the mission ended early. This is just a personal vendetta. You can do whatever you want to me. Even if you beat Bai Suoqing's entire family to ashes, it is none of my business. The logic is self-consistent. After hanging up the phone, Chen Chen breathed a sigh of relief. Now there is only one final task left for them. That is, find Bai Suoqing and kill him. However, before that, they still had a series of complicated relationships to deal with. This could not be handled by Chen Chen himself, but had to be led by Peng Diren. This means that the Dongfeng Corps really has to reach Gongtang first, and then reunite with Peng Diren. The military order he issued was for 3 hours, and there are still 2 hours left. The straight line distance from Manda is nearly 40 kilometers, and the total distance is about 60 kilometers, which is definitely in time. Thinking of this, Chen Chen immediately gave the order. Check the loot and restock the general ammunition within 10 minutes. We are ready to set off to the arch. Receive. Everyone answered in turn. Their spirits were extremely high. It is impossible not to be full, because they have just won a battle in which they thought the outnumbered army was extremely exaggerated. With only 20 or so people, they defeated the enemy and made them flee in disarray, while not a single casualty was reported on their side. Is this the suppressive power of Caliber? No, this is the dual suppressive force of Caliber and tactics. Invisibly, a seed was planted in the hearts of these mercenaries. They vaguely felt that fighting a war might not be just a skill to make a living as they had previously believed, but a technology with great prospects. In comparison, the Jackal seemed to have little interest in this victory. He followed Chen Chen in boredom and said, "The last battle was boring. The enemy was a bit too stupid. But this is also the true level of the local militia in this area. If the convoy is moving like this, isn't it just asking for trouble? In fact, we don't need more than 20 people. I think 4 people can take it down. Anyway, 4 people can just operate 3 automatic grenades and 1 rocket launcher." Got it. Next time there's such an opportunity, I'll give it to the 4 of you. Chen Chen answered seriously. "But I'm just giving an example." The Jackal rolled his eyes, then said with a little emotion, "It's because the previous battles were so exciting that this one seems mediocre. Motorized raids, guerrilla warfare, creating opportunities to attack, interspersed harassment, creating opportunities for the strong to attack the weak. Really, with this level of tactics and strategy, it's hard for me to imagine how many teams in the world can achieve this. I want to ask Bao Qi about the Battle of Timu Mountain. Do you know the difference between your battle and that one's? We don't have a base. General L's strategy is based on the construction of a base." Chen Chen answered without hesitation. "Yes, you don't even have a base. You rely entirely on the team's mobility and combat efficiency to create time differences and strength differences. You are a true master. Do you know what timing is? This is timing. I even think this is more meticulous than what your general did." "Then don't talk about it." Chen Chen shook his head and explained. "General Su is good at large-scale troop operations, and the distance of penetration is calculated in hundreds of kilometers. Our battle is actually just a small fight. But if you want to talk about the essence, I did absorb a little bit. Anyway, I learned how to fight back from him. You are too modest. I am very curious about what will happen if you really start to command a large-scale military operation one day. Oh, in modern warfare, where there's so many opportunities for decisive battles between armies." After Chen Chen finished speaking, Jackal couldn't help but be stunned. "That's right. You all have already formed a system. There's no need for a core decisive battle. A mechanized infantry brigade can easily defeat the entire Southeast Asia. At this point in time, the Combined Forces Brigade in the north has not yet been formed. So in the eyes of the Jackal, the mechanized infantry brigade is already the ace among aces." After hearing this, Chen Chen couldn't help but laugh. "You will see in another 7 years when the Combined Forces Brigade is formed. Then you will know what true despair is." However, despite saying so, Chen Chen still denied it with a serious face. "It's not our mechanized infantry brigade. We don't have a mechanized infantry brigade. Don't talk nonsense. The Dongfeng Corps only has a few broken vehicles, and their motorization is just okay. But how can it be considered mechanized infantry combat?" Yes, you are right. The Jackal stopped talking. And at this time, Shidakai and White Dog had led the team to complete the collection and sorting of all the key spoils. The general ammunition was replenished, but the special ammunition was not found. Bai Sawacheng's private army seems to be quite large, but they are incredibly poor. The most heavy firepower in the team, apart from heavy machine guns, is the M63 mountain howitzer. This thing can be called a panacea, but no matter how many there are, it will be useless if it is useless. Is there nothing good at all? Looking at Shidakai, who was full of disappointment, Chen Chen frowned and asked, "There really is nothing at all. I'll go and see for myself." As he spoke, Chen Chen walked down the hillside and came to the open space where the spoils were piled. And after taking a look, he understood why Shidakai said there was nothing left. My goodness, this scene was simply a gathering of USSA, simply translated as copycat weapons. There were Kachin and Lao Kai hand-rolled trucks, golden triangle howitzers with plastic shells, mini catapults that looked like mortars but were actually grenade launchers, and mortars with a caliber of 120 millimeters but a barrel as long as 3 meters. The 4 M63 mountain howitzers were already considered advanced equipment in the 500-man team. Burn it, it's really useless. Chen Chen shook his head helplessly. He really looked down upon these things. Bai Sawacheng makes so much money. Why is he so vague about the equipment of his private soldiers? But it is also possible that he did not find it. After all, most of the convoy was engulfed by the incendiary bombs thrown by Li Bang, and a lot of equipment was in the fire and could not be dug out at all. Forget it, let's retreat. Chen Chen waved his hand, and the team quickly assembled. However, at this moment, the last group of team members carrying equipment arrived. "Captain, we found this." It was snatched from the fire, and it's basically undamaged. Chen Chen took a look subconsciously, and the things in their hands finally made Chen Chen's eyes light up. QLZ 87 automatic howitzer. This thing is the predecessor of the legendary sniper grenade. It uses a 6-round or 15-round drum magazine, has an effective range of more than 800 meters, and has strong armor-piercing capabilities. It can even be regarded as a small howitzer. It can be said that this thing is a product of the low level of mechanization and motorization in the North in the 1980s. Since the design concept requires soldiers to carry the grenade launcher for long distances to fight, this gun weighs only 20 kilograms. Without a tripod, it is not a problem even for one person to carry it, and it is very flexible. The fact that Bai Suocheng thought of equipping his private soldiers with this thing shows that his tactical thinking is above the qualified level. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to use his private soldiers before they were suffocated to death in the car. Take it with you. Chen Chen spoke immediately. Hearing his words, the jackal scratched his head subconsciously. Is there really any point to this? You already have 3 automatic howitzers. Why do you need a single-person howitzer? It seems useless. Chen Chen shook his head and replied, so you Chizili have not been tested on the battlefield and cannot understand the purpose of each weapon at all. Do you think this thing is used to provide fire coverage and kill enemy, lightly armored targets? What else? The jackal asked back in confusion. Not really. Don't you think this thing is very suitable for beheading? 800-meter range. Look, it also has an optical sight. Isn't it much better than the M82A1? Who are you going to blow it up with? The jackal gasped. I don't know. Let's see who will be the next unlucky one. Chen Chen waved his hand, watching the team members load the 87 howitzers onto the vehicle and contentedly conceive future application scenarios for this weapon. The convoy headed northwest, and this time, they really bypassed Guanyin Mountain and started heading towards the Gongdang area. However, no one dared to intercept them anymore. Even the Burmese troops in Mangdamba were too busy cleaning up the mess and rescuing the wounded to take care of themselves and turn a blind eye to the Dongfeng Corps that swaggered through the edge of the defense zone. It took more than an hour for the convoy to successfully reach the vicinity of the archway, but before they got close, they heard intensive gunfire ahead. The battle is not over yet. Chen Chen ordered the convoy to stay on guard about 3 kilometers away from Gongtang, while he took Lin He, Li Bang, and Shi Dakai to conduct reconnaissance. Because he was familiar with the terrain, Lin He moved through the jungle very quickly. It only took them 30 minutes to cover a distance of 3 kilometers and reach the edge of the real battlefield. After occupying the commanding heights, the battle below became clear at a certain point in time. The fighting took place entirely within the narrow valley of Xiagongtang village, with the focus concentrated near the town hospital. Just as Chen Chen had expected, the Burmese mountain battalion had all withdrawn, leaving only Bai Suocheng's border defense battalion and half of the private soldiers defending with light weapons. The Allied forces led by Peng Diren launched a fierce offensive, but the problem was that they were not superior in terms of weapons and equipment. After all, the border defense battalion was considered a regular army. Although their artillery battalion was destroyed in the last battle, it still had a small number of 107 rocket launchers, several small and medium-caliber mortars, and mountain howitzers. The supporting firepower formed by these large-caliber weapons blocked the Allied offensive several times. Peng Diren moved left and right, concentrating all the heavy firepower he had captured in an attempt to break through the defense line, but was beaten back again and again. The will to fight is too weak. Lying in the woods, Chen Chen shook his head and said, you see, several times the Allied forces had already broken through the border camp's defense line, but because of combat casualties, these soldiers disobeyed orders and withdrew. It's a pity that if the Dongfeng Corps went to fight, it would be impossible for us to fight a positional battle like this. They used the 4-to-4 tactics we taught before. Shi Dakai said thoughtfully. Yes, customized tactics. I learned them pretty quickly, but I'm not very proficient at them. No wonder the adjutant said that the Allied forces have become stronger recently. So this is the reason. But it's only so strong. That's not bad. Several people were whispering about the war in front of them, as if they were just spectators. But in fact, everyone knows that the reason why this battle can be fought is inseparable from them. We have to help Peng Diren and can't delay it for too long. After a little thought, Chen Chen spoke decisively. Understood. I'll have the convoy drive straight up, but don't always do such reckless things. Chen Chen shook his head helplessly, then said, let Bai go carry the 87-gram pomegranate up. This place is about 900 meters away from the town hospital, within the effective range of the grenade. Look, that low one-story building to the east of the town hospital is definitely the headquarters of the Border Defense Battalion. The position they chose is quite good. There is a hospital building in front of them as cover, so no direct or indirect fire can reach them. There is a wide space behind, so it will be easy to retreat. But the premise is that no one steals my ass. Their perimeter security is not good enough. This is our chance. Clear. Shi Dakai immediately began to contact the rear, and 1 hour later, the 87 howitzers were delivered. Chen Chen set up the bipod and aimed at the enemy headquarters. The distance is 900 meters and the density is adjusted in place. Chen Chen took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Then, the body was completely still and the finger had no intention of pulling the trigger. Bang! The first grenade flew out, and after a few seconds of flight, it landed accurately about 2 meters to the side of the command center. The loud noise of the explosion stunned all the enemies moving outside the command center. This grenade did not cause any effective casualties, but the second one might not be the case. I feel it. Chen Chen slightly adjusted his lying position, and then the second shell suddenly flew out. This time, the grenade hit the roof of the headquarters. Then, the third and fourth grenades were fired. After the smoke and dust cleared, someone rushed into the headquarters building and dragged out a bloody body. Chen Chen quickly put away his gun and decisively ordered, retreat. After the command post was blown up, the Ku army's defense line quickly collapsed. It could even be said that it was not a collapse, but rather a pile of strange buildings built with strong magnets as the core. After the magnet was demagnetized by a shell, The iron powder surrounding it quickly collapsed and turned into dust and powder without any lethality. The few hundred remaining Allied forces were unstoppable and chased the Border Defense Battalion and the Bai family's private soldiers all over the mountain. After judging that the situation was irreversible, the Border Defense Battalion took the lead in making a move that they had become familiar with. Voted. The guns they had just received from the logistics department were thrown to the ground again. The Bai family's private soldiers certainly did not struggle anymore and followed the Border Defense Battalion and raised their hands. This is easy to understand. Damn, the mountain camp has withdrawn. Why are we still fighting here? Don't fight and find that your hometown is gone. It's better to join the Allied forces to save trouble. Thus, the scene of a few hundred people capturing less than 1,000 people reappeared. When Chen Chen contacted Peng Diren and drove the convoy into the Gongtang, he saw the shocked, terrified, and puzzled eyes of the border guards squatting on the ground. Commander Chen. As soon as the battlefield was under control, Peng Diren couldn't wait to run to Chen Chen. He opened his arms and wanted to hug Chen Chen, but seemed to feel that he was not qualified. After hesitating, he still stretched out his hand and shook hands with Chen enthusiastically, but restrainedly. Commander Chen, the customized tactics you mentioned earlier are so useful. Really, I feel like my team's combat effectiveness has improved more than a little. The breakthrough was so obvious this time. If it was in the past, it would probably take 3 days and 3 nights to break through. But this time, we had several wonderful breakthroughs. It's a pity that we haven't trained enough, otherwise we would have taken down the arch before you got here. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry to bother you this time. Did you have a smooth journey here? It went smoothly. You should not be too confident in your combat ability. Customized tactics are very rigid, just like the set patterns in Go. You can have them in your tactics, but if it's the only thing, it can't be called a tactic at all. You are lucky that the Mountain Battalion was transferred away. Otherwise, if you were to blindly follow the established pattern, even the weakest regular army would be able to defeat you. Understood, understood. Peng Diren had an expression of having learned a lesson. If the occasion was not wrong, he would probably have immediately taken out a small notebook to write down what Chen Chen said. But soon, he asked with some concern, "Sir, let me ask you again, what should we do with these prisoners? There are too many prisoners to manage. If Bai Sawatching comes to kill us again, I'm afraid there will be a mutiny. Can I ask you to help defend again?" Peng Diren's idea was very simple. That is, since Chen Chen appeared here, it meant that they must have shaken off the pursuers from Laojia. But getting rid of it doesn't mean getting rid of it completely. They have done such a big thing in Laojia, the enemy will definitely come after them. If it is not handled properly, the victory he has achieved with great difficulty may be lost. However, Chen Chen's answer was far beyond his expectations. Where does Bai Sawatching still have soldiers? Half of his private soldiers are here, and the other half were killed by us. He is probably thinking about how to escape from the country now, so he has no time to care about you. What? Peng Diren was stunned. No, Commander Chen, what do you mean by killed? Didn't you come from Laojia? Bai Sawatching has a team of 500 to 600 people over there. We first went to Manda and defeated his private soldiers, and then turned back to Gongtang. Nothing to say. Peng Diren opened his mouth, wanted to say something, but felt that nothing he said would be appropriate. All praise and compliments are meaningless, because how could someone who can do such a thing still need praise from others? In more than 3 hours, they first blew up Lu Jingxiang, then turned around and headed to Manda to kill a private army of several hundred people, and finally turned around again to attack Gongtang, and incidentally destroyed the enemy's command post that they have been unable to capture for a long time. What kind of god of war is this? Why can others accomplish so many things in 3 hours, while I can only fight a stalemate with those mixed teams whose combat effectiveness is not strong? At this moment, Peng Diren deeply felt that the gap between people can sometimes be so big that it can almost cause reproductive isolation. After a long time, he finally said, "Commander Chen, what are you going to do next? We need to stop the fighting with Myanmar. We attacked their military camps, and someone needs to take the blame. Do you understand what I mean?" "I see." Peng Diren nodded immediately and replied, "We attacked the Mangdamba military camp in order to divert the main force of the Burmese mountain camp. We have good reasons and sufficient motivations, and it is not difficult to explain. Moreover, this raid originally took place on a battlefield. There is no hatred between our two sides that cannot be resolved. This is a conflict that can be resolved through a deal. Don't worry, Commander Chen. I will be in charge of the subsequent negotiations. I guarantee that I will get rid of you all." Chen Chen smiled with satisfaction. This was the solution he wanted. Many people feel that if the two forces go to war, it will be a fight to the death. But in fact, this inference only applies to the Dongfeng Corps and only to the Dongfeng Corps itself. Just like Chen Chen and Bai Sawatching. Even though the fight turned out to be a mess, Bai Sawatching still reserved the option of ceasefire and talks, but was rejected by Chen Chen. The same goes for the Burmese army and the Allied forces. Fighting is not the goal, but only a means to gain benefits. Now that the fighting has reached the point where both sides will suffer if we continue, it's time to sit down and have a good talk. Chen Chen felt relieved to leave this matter to Peng Diren. As long as it is handled properly, the conflict between China and Myanmar can be easily forgotten. Anyway, everyone is doing it for money and status. This was the case with Suo Minwu, Nyu Chen, and Ong Tingling, who died inexplicably, and even more so with Peng Jiaxing and Peng Diren. Since this is the case, everyone should be more sensible, don't be stubborn, and don't make things out of control. After solving a difficult problem, Chen Chen felt much more relaxed. He looked at Peng Diren and asked with a hint of sarcasm, "How about it? Can your old man come back?" Peng Diren chuckled and replied, "Whether he can come back or not actually depends on what you say." "What the hell? So sensible?" Chen Chen looked at Peng Diren with new respect. He had originally thought that after winning a great victory and regaining his things, Peng Diren would become complacent and self-righteous. But it was obvious that he was really hurt this time. He was hurt by the beating and clearly recognized his position. However, Chen Chen would definitely not continue the topic. Based on his understanding of the North, it won't be long before a special person will contact Peng Diren and give him some warnings and hints to let him know what to do next. I don't need to get involved. At least I can't speak arbitrarily and blindly on behalf of the real big brother. That is overstepping one's authority and is also a case of blind self-confidence. Therefore, Chen Chen just smiled and replied, I can't decide these things. I'm just a mercenary. I fight for money. We suffered a great loss of equipment this time. We basically ran out of stock. I was wondering if you guys could take some discretion since you captured so much spoils of war. Of course. Of course. Peng Diren looked frank and didn't feel offended at all by Chen Chen's behavior of scraping off 2 tails of meat from every passing mouse. On the contrary, he was extremely happy. Is asking you for money making things difficult for you? Don't talk nonsense. With his status, no matter how many people handed the whip to him, he would not bother to whip him. Okay? What's wrong with being an ATM slave? Explode coins. Then he continued. Even if we don't mention that Commander Chen helped us contain the mountain camp, the few shells at the hospital alone are worth at least $1 million US. No, it's $2 million. Sir, let's see whether you want cash or equipment. We also have some purchasing channels here. If you want equipment, we will definitely do our best. I need the equipment, but I'll keep it with you first. Chen Chen answered decisively. He really has no shortage of money now. The $8 million US in the company's account cannot be spent. Since there is no opportunity to purchase more useful equipment for the time being, there is no need to accumulate too much cash. What? You mean a helicopter? How can that thing be delivered so quickly? It's not a foreign trade product, like the Mengshi vehicle. At least you have to wait for a while, maybe 1 or 2 months at the fastest, or several months at the slowest. By that time, I didn't know how much more money I would have in my hands. So, instead of asking for money, it is better to see what equipment can be dug out from Peng Diren. No problem, sir. Give me some time. I will definitely satisfy you. The exchange between the two ended like this. All members of the Dongfeng Corps entered the Gongtang village camp to rest, and Chen Chen took the original 4-member group of the Dongfeng Corps to visit Li Bang's home. Returning to the door of the earthen house again, Li Bang couldn't help but feel a little emotional. In just a few weeks, his old house had been abandoned, with snakes and rats running rampant, and the stench was overwhelming. Actually, this could not be called an old house, but an old nest. After all, a house is used to describe a place to live, and this shabby mud house was at best a slightly sturdy shack. There's nothing to be nostalgic about. Li Bang took out an incendiary bomb from his chest and threw it into the house without hesitation. As the flames rose, he finally said goodbye to the past. Seeing the relieved expression on his face, Chen Chen asked, What are your plans for the future? He actually asked this question many times, but every time there was a new change in the situation, he would ask again. This is not being nagging. This is being responsible to your subordinates and to yourself. Hearing this, Li Bang scratched his head and subconsciously asked, Aren't we still going to kill Bai Suoqing? What I mean is, what are your plans after you kill Bai Suoqing? His death is no longer a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of time. As for you, your revenge will be completed soon, and you will make enough money. If you need it, I can even give you some extra money so that you can take your family to do what you really want to do. No, Brother Chen. Li Bang scratched his head in confusion and continued. Bai Suoqing is dead, but isn't Zhao Jiaoyang still alive over at the 505th Brigade? What does Zhao Jiaoyang have to do with you? Chen Chen couldn't help but feel angry. Isn't he our next target? Who told you he was the next target? Didn't he catch some small fish? Aren't small fish caught in a thong? Isn't Zhao Jiaoyang the one who brought Lianyi here? Chen Chen was completely speechless. Completely different from Shidakai, Li Bang doesn't have any overly complicated ideas at all. He doesn't know what spring cleaning means, he doesn't know what changing the world means, he doesn't know what kill all the damn people means. His vision is very narrow and short-sighted, which is caused by his upbringing and educational background. He can only see a very small range in front of him, so all his decisions are made based on these things. For example, if Bai Suoqing, Ming Xuechang and their gang killed his family, he would have to kill Bai Suoqing. For another example, if Zhao Jiaoyang had an indirect grudge against Xiaoyu, he would have to help Chen Chen kill Zhao Jiaoyang. He doesn't think about any complicated political struggles, nor does he care about how the general situation changes. His life trajectory is made up of a series of small goals. This also explains why he was able to persist in such boring training for so long, and even gained far more than ordinary people. In a sense, this is pure. Chen Chen sighed and continued to ask, What happens after we get rid of Zhao Jiaoyang? Who knows? Just fight first. You have nothing to do anyway. Okay, good. Chen Chen felt inexplicably aggrieved. It was as if he was trying hard to confess his love to a girl, but she told him, Your zipper is unzipped. However, after a brief moment of aggrieved, he also felt a sense of relief. Yes, the life of a mercenary doesn't have to be too complicated. I'm free anyways, I might as well give it a try. The flames burned more and more fiercely, and all the filth and corruption were burned to ashes. Chen Chen's face was a little hot from the roasting, and Shidakai on the side had already hidden away. Stand back, thermite splashes are no joke. After hearing Shirdakai's words, the three of them took a few steps back. The wind in northern Myanmar cannot be described as cold in any way. After being heated by the flames, it seems even hotter. The hot wind blew past, bringing with it a new piece of news. The White Army was defeated. According to the latest communication results, all of them except Lu Guoxi have been abandoned. The big cleanup has started again, and all the blame is now on Baitu. This coup was classified as an armed riot, and the Prung family will return to Kokong to stabilize the situation. In exchange, the Prung family will accept reorganization but retain considerable autonomy. At the same time, the remaining interests of the three families will be divided equally among the Peng family, Nu Qin, and Suo Minwu. Everyone is happy, except for Bai Suoqing. He was fleeing in a hurry. After failing to cross the border from Nansan, he was heading south with a small team of elite private soldiers of less than 20 people to protect his family. And just now he appeared in Hobin. Is Tom Man at all?